Semantic priming is one of the brain's most quietly manipulative persuasion tools, and most people have no idea it's happening to them. At its core, semantic priming is the act of subtly planting words, images, or ideas into someone's mind so that their subconscious begins to make associations, often without them ever realizing it. These associations then guide their next thoughts, decisions, and reactions, almost like invisible puppet strings pulling at their brain. Semantic priming. The human mind is not as rational as we like to believe. It's reactive, pattern-seeking, and deeply influenced by what came just before. If you hear the word ocean, then moon, and then someone says tide, your brain lights up with recognition. It feels right, natural, obvious. That's the power of semantic priming. It silently steers your mental trajectory before you even make a conscious choice. Now imagine this being used in marketing, in courtrooms, in politics, or even in everyday conversations. When someone says words like freedom, safety, or danger early in a speech, they're priming you for how they want you to interpret everything that follows. You don't even notice the shift, but it's already happened. Your lens has been warped. The mood of a room, a headline, even the scent in the air can prime your emotional state to be more compliant, suspicious, trusting, or fearful. One word can tip your judgment. One image can pull a trigger buried deep in your psyche. This is why semantic priming is so dangerously effective. It doesn't shout. It whispers, and our subconscious never stops listening. Processing fluency. Processing fluency is a deceptively powerful persuasion mechanism that works by making information feel easy. And when something feels easy, the brain mistakes it as true. This trick hijacks a primal survival instinct buried deep in our cognition. If it feels smooth, familiar, and effortless to understand, then it must be safe, trustworthy, right. And in a world overloaded with complexity, the brain clings to fluency like a lifeline. At its heart, processing fluency is the experience of how easily your brain can absorb and process something, whether it's a message, a name, an image, or even a font. When something is presented in a clear, simple, fluent way, it feels good, it feels right. You're more likely to believe it, agree with it, and remember it. But when something is complex, awkward, or disfluent, your brain senses danger, even if the actual message is true. This is how manipulators slip past your defenses. A politician repeats a phrase over and over until it rolls off your mental tongue like a melody. A scam artist chooses a company name that sounds trustworthy, fluid, like something you've heard before. A marketer uses short, punchy slogans and clean visuals that your brain can digest instantly, making their product feel more credible, more likable, more safe. Processing fluency works because the brain confuses ease with accuracy. It creates a seductive illusion that bypasses logic and lodges itself in your belief system. And the scariest part? You often don't even know it's happening. It just feels true. False attribution. False attribution is one of the most quietly dangerous persuasion tricks because it doesn't need to change what you think, only what you connect it to. The human brain is constantly making unconscious associations, linking emotions to experiences, people, and ideas. When those links are engineered, deliberately manipulated, you begin to feel trust, fear, love, or disgust towards something that never earned it, and you won't even know why. Imagine hearing a cheerful jingle while seeing a brand logo, or listening to relaxing music while reading a message from a politician, or smelling fresh coffee in a meeting about a new product launch. These sensations trigger positive emotions, and your brain, seeking to make sense of them, attaches those emotions to the nearest object, the brand, the message, the person. It doesn't matter if they caused the feeling. Your brain assumes they did. This is how advertising makes you nostalgic for a soda, how propaganda makes you fear entire groups of people, how someone can gain your trust simply by standing next to someone you already admire. False attribution latches onto the nearest target and stamps it with whatever emotion was already flooding your system. The brain is lazy. It shortcuts the source. It doesn't stop to ask, where is this feeling coming from? Instead, it builds false bridges, and the next time you see that person or product, you feel something. That feeling isn't random. It was planted, engineered, designed, and because your emotions now feel internally generated, you trust them as real. But they're not. They're stolen. Illusory truth effect. The illusory truth effect is a psychological trapdoor that turns repetition into reality. It doesn't matter if a statement is false, distorted, or outright absurd. If you hear it enough times, your brain starts to believe it. Not because it's backed by logic, not because it's been proven, but because it feels familiar. And what feels familiar feels safe, feels true, feels right. This is why propaganda works, why conspiracy theories spread, why rumors ruin lives. The more often a message is repeated, the more fluently the brain processes it. That fluency, silent and invisible, creates an eerie comfort, a sense of recognition, and that recognition quietly whispers, "I've heard this before. It must be true." It bypasses critical thinking. It slides under the radar of logic. It gets accepted not because it's credible, but because it's constant. Manipulators exploit this by repeating the same lie in different forms, across different platforms, through different voices, and every time you hear it, whether you agree or not, it becomes harder to dismiss. The mind mistakes the echo for evidence. This is how false narratives become collective beliefs, how brands gain trust, how political myths grow legs and run. The worst part? The effect doesn't care if you know what's happening. Even when you're aware, the repetition still takes root, still leaves a residue, still bends your perception. It's why slogans are short, headlines repeat, and lies, told boldly and often enough, begin to feel like facts. Repetition isn't harmless. It reshapes truth, quietly, permanently. Ziggarnic effect. The ziggarnic effect is the mental itch you can't scratch, the unfinished loop that hijacks your attention and refuses to let go. At its core, this effect is the brain's obsessive compulsion to seek closure. When something is left incomplete, an interrupted task, a hanging story, an unanswered question, your mind locks onto it like a predator. It lingers, it loops, it festers, and until resolution is found, your focus stays trapped in its grip. This is why cliffhangers work so well, why a half-told secret is more powerful than a full confession, why unfinished goals feel heavier than completed ones. The human brain craves completion, and when denied it, the tension builds like static. Unresolved tasks generate cognitive pressure, a subtle, gnawing discomfort that keeps the idea alive far longer than one that's already been tied up. This psychological tension is pure gold for persuaders. Marketers tease products with "coming soon." Storytellers leave gaps, knowing your brain will fill them in, and keep thinking about them until it gets answers. Salespeople mention a bonus but delay revealing the full details. Each interruption plants a hook. Each lack of closure builds desire. Even conversations can be shaped this way. A person who ends an interaction mid-thought, strategically, can haunt your mind for days. The ziggarnic effect pulls your attention back like a magnet, again and again, until closure is finally granted, or until obsession takes root. And in persuasion, obsession is a weapon. When someone can't stop thinking about you, your idea, your product, they're already halfway persuaded. Cognitive ease. Cognitive ease is the silent manipulator behind so many of your decisions, shaping what you believe, trust, and act upon, all without asking for your permission. It's not about what's true, it's about what's easy. When your brain encounters something it can process smoothly, it breathes a sigh of relief. It feels good, familiar, safe, and that good feeling gets misread as a signal. This must be right. But the truth is far more dangerous. Cognitive ease can turn lies into beliefs, mediocrity into authority, and manipulation into influence. A smooth website, a clear font, a friendly tone, these things make you feel calm. And when you feel calm, you don't dig deeper, you don't question, you accept. This is why advertising uses clean design, simple words, warm faces. Why political messaging uses short slogans and repetitive phrases. Why fake news often goes viral. Your brain's default setting is efficiency, not truth. When something feels easy to understand, your mental guard lowers. The harder something is to process, the more likely your brain is to reject it, even if it's absolutely true. The scariest part? This all happens subconsciously. You don't realize that your judgments are being warped by fluency, that you're trusting something not because it's earned your trust, but because it didn't challenge you, didn't ask anything of you, just whispered sweet familiarity and slid past your defenses. Cognitive ease doesn't argue, it doesn't debate, it seduces, and when it wins, you don't even realize you've been persuaded because it felt so good to believe. Rhyming persuasion. Rhyming persuasion is one of the most underestimated psychological tools in the arsenal of influence because it feels playful, harmless, even poetic. But beneath its lyrical surface lies a deep manipulation of the brain's truth filters. When a message rhymes, it doesn't just sound nice, it sounds right. It bypasses skepticism, it slips past logic, and it nestles itself into the mind like a catchy song you can't forget. The reason rhyme holds such power is tied to fluency. Rhymed phrases are easier to process, easier to remember, and most dangerously, easier to believe. Our brains have been conditioned since childhood to associate rhyme with wisdom. Nursery rhymes, proverbs, slogans. What you see is what you get. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. These feel like truth, not because they're accurate, but because they flow. Advertisers exploit this. Politicians exploit this. Con artists and courtroom lawyers exploit this. They wrap their message in rhythm and rhyme, and suddenly it sticks. Not because it's logical, but because it's musical. The rhyme masks the lie. The cadence covers the contradiction. You nod, not because you agree, but because it sounds satisfying. Even in moments of doubt, rhyme disarms. A rhymed warning feels more serious. A rhymed promise feels more trustworthy. People share rhymed content more. They quote it, they spread it, and once a rhymed idea enters the public consciousness, it becomes almost immune to challenge, because debunking it feels clunky, unnatural, flat. In the world of persuasion, rhyme is not just style, it's camouflage. Anchoring heuristics. Anchoring heuristics is a cognitive hijack, so sneaky, so deeply embedded in your decision-making that it can warp your perception with a single number. It works like this. The first figure you see, no matter how random, irrelevant, or outrageous, anchors itself in your mind. Everything that comes after is judged relative to that number, not on its own merit, not with logic, but with comparison. This is why a $2,000 watch marked down to $499 feels like a steal, why a realtor shows you a dumpy $900,000 house first to make the $700,000 one seem like a bargain, why salespeople mention original value before giving you the real offer. That first number sinks its claws into your subconscious and drags every following thought toward it. You don't realize it's happening. You just feel like you're making a fair decision, but you're not. You're being steered. The brain does this because it hates uncertainty. When faced with a new situation, it latches onto the first available clue. That clue becomes the standard, the baseline, the frame. And even if it's ridiculous, like asking people if Gandhi died before or after age 144, they'll still adjust their guess around it. It doesn't matter that it's absurd. It matters that it was first. Anchoring isn't just about prices. It influences judgments, expectations, even your sense of what's possible. It's how politicians justify budgets, how con artists extract money, how negotiators control the room. Anchoring doesn't push, it plants. And once planted, your mind grows around it, believing it was always your idea. Ben Franklin effect. The Ben Franklin effect is a disarming, counterintuitive persuasion technique that flips the logic of human behavior on its head. It doesn't work by getting people to do favors for you because they like you. It works by getting people to like you because they did you a favor. And once they do, their mind scrambles to make sense of why. The result is a powerful psychological twist. They convince themselves they like you. The story goes that Franklin, faced with a political rival's hostility, didn't try to charm him or argue. Instead, he asked to borrow a rare book from the man's library. The rival, flattered and slightly curious, agreed. Franklin returned it with thanks. A short while later, the man who once despised him became an ally. Why? Because doing a favor for someone triggers cognitive dissonance. The brain whispers, "Why would I help someone I dislike?" And then it answers itself, "Maybe I don't dislike them after all." The implications are enormous. This effect bypasses defensive walls. When you ask for help, a small favor, an opinion, a little advice, you make people feel needed, important, invested, and once they act on your behalf, they unknowingly forge an emotional bond, not because you gave them value, but because they gave it to you. This is how leaders win loyalty, how manipulators earn trust, how enemies become friends. It's persuasion without a pitch, influence without a demand. And the more personal the favor feels, the stronger the effect. A mind that chooses to help you becomes a heart that starts to care. Decoy effect. The decoy effect is a masterstroke of psychological manipulation that turns your free will into a carefully guided illusion. It works by introducing a third, deliberately worse option, one you were never meant to choose, solely to steer you toward the one they want you to pick. This decoy isn't an accident, it's bait. And the moment it enters the picture, your perception of value is no longer your own. Imagine you're buying coffee. Option A is $3 for a small. Option B is $7 for a large. Most people choose the small, but now they add option C, $6.50 for a medium. Suddenly, the large looks like a far better deal. Why pay $6.50 for a medium when the large is just 50 cents more? The large, which once felt excessive, now feels rational, smart. You've been anchored, framed, and pushed, without force, without pressure, without even realizing it. Your brain loves comparisons. It doesn't know how to judge value in a vacuum, so it clings to whatever's next to it. The decoy warps the mental scale, making one choice feel disproportionately attractive. It shows up in subscription plans, restaurant menus, product pricing, insurance policies, anywhere you're asked to decide. The decoy isn't there to serve you. It's there to serve the choice they already chose for you. And it works again and again because your brain trusts its own logic, even when that logic was built on a lie. The decoy doesn't win. It's never supposed to. It's only there to make the other option irresistible. Temporal landmarks. Temporal landmarks are invisible doorways in time, mental reset buttons that make change feel not only possible, but urgent. These moments, often disguised as birthdays, New Year's, Mondays, or even the start of a month, trigger a powerful psychological response. They separate your old self from the new you and give you permission to act differently, to begin again, to believe that transformation is suddenly within reach. The brain loves structure. It thrives on beginnings, endings, and clean breaks. When a moment feels like a chapter break in your life story, motivation surges, guilt softens, hope sharpens. You feel the tug to start fresh, to chase goals, to finally make the changes you've been avoiding. And that's where persuasion slips in. Marketers, influencers, leaders, they exploit temporal landmarks with terrifying precision. Start your journey this Monday. A new you for the new year. Only 30 days left in the quarter. Are you where you want to be? These moments aren't chosen randomly. They're strategically timed to strike when your psychological defenses are softest, when you're most likely to say yes. Even tragedies become unintentional landmarks. A breakup, a job loss, a near-death experience. These two split time in half and create a hunger for rebirth. And where there's hunger, there's vulnerability. The emotional pull of a temporal landmark is subtle, but fierce. It makes you feel like you're stepping into a portal, that the past can be left behind, that a better version of you is just on the other side. And when someone offers the key, they don't have to push. You're already reaching for the door. Expectation priming. Expectation priming is the psychological sleight of hand that turns belief into experience. It works by planting a silent script inside someone's mind before they even encounter the real event. Once that seed is there, the brain doesn't just wait to observe reality, it begins shaping it, filtering it, twisting it to match the expectation. And what's most dangerous? We almost never realize it's happening. Tell someone they're about to meet a kind person, and they'll interpret neutral behavior as warmth. Tell them they're about to face a difficult task, and even a simple one feels like a struggle. The moment an expectation is set, it becomes a lens, and that lens changes everything they see. Their brain stops processing reality objectively. It starts curating it, bending facts and feelings to fit the story they were told. This is how powerful influencers guide opinion before a single word is spoken. A speaker says, "This will be the most controversial thing you hear today." And suddenly the audience braces, reacts, feels the controversy, whether it's real or not. A marketer says, "This product changes everything," and your mind begins searching for evidence, eager to confirm the prophecy. Expectation priming isn't persuasion through proof. It's persuasion through prediction. It steals control from the senses and hands it to suggestion. It fuels placebo effects, sells empty promises, and shapes how we see others before they've even spoken. When expectation enters first, judgment rarely enters clean, and by the time you're reacting, your mind has already been told what to find. Mere measurement effect. The mere measurement effect is the silent force that turns a simple question into a psychological contract. It doesn't ask you to change. It doesn't push you to act. All it does is ask. But the moment you answer, your brain starts writing a story you now feel obligated to fulfill. The question becomes a seed, and without warning, that seed grows into behavior. At the heart of this effect is a strange truth. Simply measuring your intentions changes your future actions. When someone asks, "Do you plan to donate this year?" or "How likely are you to exercise next week?" they're not just gathering data, they're priming your identity. Your answer shapes how you see yourself. It forces your brain to take a position, even if only hypothetically. And once you declare a future version of yourself, your subconscious begins to align with it. This is how subtle influence works, not by forcing, but by asking, quietly, strategically. Companies use post-purchase surveys to reinforce loyalty. Coaches ask what you'll do next Monday. Political campaigns ask if you plan to vote, not to collect answers, but to create voters. It's powerful because it slips past resistance. There's no pressure, just a question. But once you answer, the emotional momentum begins. You don't want to betray the person you just claimed to be. The cost of inconsistency feels heavier than before. Your own words become the leash. And so you follow through, not because someone pushed you, but because you said you would. And now you feel watched by yourself. Peak technique. The peak technique is a psychological ambush, a subtle disruption to your mental autopilot that forces your brain to wake up and pay attention. At its core, this method breaks through resistance by doing one simple thing, being unexpectedly specific. Instead of making a standard, predictable request, the persuader throws in a number, a detail, a twist that doesn't fit, and in that moment of confusion, the brain pauses and becomes vulnerable. Picture someone asking, "Can you spare 17 cents?" Or, "Could you help me carry exactly 4.5 books?" Your brain stutters. That's not what it expected. It was prepared to say no, to ignore, to dismiss. But now, curiosity creeps in. Why that amount? Why that request? The moment of disorientation causes a break in mental pattern, a moment of openness where the reflexive no is suspended and the possibility of yes slips through. This technique works because humans operate on scripts. We know how to handle typical requests. We know how to ignore a beggar asking for change. But when the ask is weird, when it doesn't match the script, we hesitate. And in that hesitation, the persuader has their window. They've created just enough novelty, just enough disruption to catch your mind before it can shut the door. The peak technique isn't about logic. It's about intrusion. It doesn't ask for agreement. It demands attention. And in a world where everyone's tuned out, distracted, and defensive, that first moment of attention is everything. Once you've been piqued, you're already inside the trap. Trivial persuasion. Trivial persuasion is the quiet art of asking for what seems so small, so harmless, so inconsequential, that the brain doesn't even bother to resist. But beneath that tiny ask lies something far more dangerous, the first crack in the wall. Because once you say yes to something small, the next request feels easier, and the next. And before you realize what's happening, you've slid into agreement with something you never would have accepted at the start. The trick lies in psychology's deep craving for consistency. When you agree to a tiny favor, even one that seems pointless, signing a petition, clicking a poll, agreeing that recycling matters, you unconsciously label yourself as the kind of person who supports that cause. And once you accept that identity, turning down the next, slightly bigger request creates internal tension. Saying no feels like betrayal, not of them, of yourself. Salespeople know this. They ask, "Can I send you a quick sample?" Then, "Can I follow up?" Then, "Are you ready to place your first order?" Each step is so trivial, you don't see the manipulation until you're standing on the other side of the line, wondering how you got there. The danger of trivial persuasion isn't the ask, it's the momentum. It's the way the smallest decision reprograms your identity. It's how saying yes to a sticker on your car turns into a donation 6 weeks later. It's how, "Sure, I'll share the post," turns into advocacy. You weren't persuaded in a moment. You were walked there, inch by inch, with smiles. Affect heuristic. The affect heuristic is the silent manipulator of your decisions, the emotional shortcut your brain takes when it's too overwhelmed, too uncertain, or simply too lazy to think things through. It doesn't weigh facts. It doesn't examine logic. It just asks one question, so quietly you barely hear it. How do I feel about this? And in that feeling, a verdict is rendered. Right, wrong, safe, dangerous, worth it, or not. This is how you can instantly trust a stranger with a warm smile or fear someone based solely on a bad gut feeling. It's why a product in pretty packaging seems higher quality, why a politician who makes you feel good earns your vote, regardless of their platform. The affect heuristic replaces rational analysis with emotional echoes, and it works frighteningly well. The moment you experience a flash of emotion, fear, joy, disgust, excitement, that feeling hijacks your judgment. Your brain tags the stimulus with an emotional label and files it away. Later, when you revisit it, you don't remember why you felt that way. You just feel it again. That's the trap. The emotion becomes the truth, and the truth becomes irrelevant. Manipulators understand this deeply. They don't argue with facts. They create feelings. Scary music in political ads, tear-jerking stories in sales pitches, smiling testimonials, dark lighting, colors that unsettle, words that soothe. Every element is engineered to provoke a specific reaction because they know that once your affect is shaped, your decision will follow. You don't choose based on data, you choose based on emotion. Then you search for reasons to make it look rational, but by then, it's already too late. Contrast principle. The contrast principle is a psychological illusion that doesn't change what you see, it changes how you see it. It warps perception by manipulating the order in which things are presented, making something feel better, worse, cheaper, or more desirable purely because of what came before. It's not about facts, it's about framing, and it works because your brain doesn't judge value in isolation. It compares. Offer someone a $50 wine after a $15 bottle and it feels expensive. Offer the same $50 wine after a $300 bottle and it suddenly feels reasonable, even like a bargain. The wine didn't change, you did. Your context was hijacked. This is how luxury stores sell high-end accessories after showing you $10,000 handbags. It's how job offers seem acceptable after anchoring with inflated industry averages. It's how a manipulative partner makes their good behavior seem saintly after treating you badly. Pain, followed by relief, feels like pleasure, and your mind locks onto it like a drug. The contrast doesn't have to be extreme. A mediocre option sandwiched between two terrible ones suddenly looks amazing. The second choice didn't improve. Your brain just recalibrated its expectations. In negotiations, it's a weapon. In pricing, it's a trap. In relationships, it's a cycle. The terrifying power of the contrast principle is this: you never evaluate things as they are. You judge based on what came before. And once your perception is warped, reality becomes irrelevant. You don't choose the best option. You choose the one that feels better because of what it followed. Foot in the door is the subtle psychological technique that turns a harmless yes into a gateway drug for deeper compliance. It begins with a whisper, an innocent, low-effort request that feels too small to deny. Just a moment of your time, just one question, just a tiny favor. But behind that soft ask hides a strategy as sharp as a scalpel. Once your foot is in the door, the rest of you follows. The power of this effect lies in the mind's need to stay consistent. When you agree to something, anything, no matter how trivial, you begin to shape a self-image. I'm helpful, I'm cooperative, I care, and that identity clings to you. So when the second larger request arrives, the real request, you're already halfway down the path. Turning back means admitting you were manipulated, admitting you were wrong, and the brain hates that more than almost anything. This is why charities ask if you support clean water before asking for a donation, why marketers ask if you have a quick second before pitching, why movements recruit you to sign a cause before recruiting your time, your money, your soul. Each yes is a hook in your identity, and with every tug, you fall deeper. You won't notice it happening. You'll feel like you're making choices, but you're not. You're aligning with your previous answers, with your self-image, with the person you now feel compelled to be. Foot in the door doesn't force. It coaxes. It builds momentum. And by the time you realize how far you've walked, you're already inside. Door in the face. The door in the face technique is psychological manipulation disguised as grace. It begins with a bold ask, something unreasonably large, designed to be rejected. That first no is not a failure, it's bait, because once you slam the door on the outrageous request, the persuader comes back, humbler, softer, with a second smaller request, and suddenly that second ask feels reasonable, even though it's exactly what they wanted all along. This trick works not through logic, but guilt. The human brain is wired for reciprocity. When someone appears to back down, to compromise, we feel pressure to meet them halfway. It's as if they've done us a favor by becoming reasonable, and now we owe them a yes, even though we didn't ask for the first thing. even though the smaller request would have felt too big if it hadn't followed the monster before it. Salespeople use this with upsells. Activists use it with donations. Manipulative partners use it to lower your boundaries. Ask for everything, get denied, then ask for what you really want and let their relief work in your favor. The shift is emotional. The second offer feels safer, saner. You compare it not to your true limits, but to the absurdity you just declined. Your no softens, the pressure eases, you want to be fair, and in that moment, you give in, not because the request makes sense, but because it feels like the right thing to do. But the truth is, the second ask was never a concession. It was the plan. From the very beginning. Reverse psychology. Reverse psychology is the art of control through rebellion, an elegant manipulation that doesn't tell you what to do, but dares you not to. It works by exploiting one of the most primal forces in human nature, the need for autonomy. The second someone feels their freedom is being threatened, a silent fire ignites inside them. They push back, they assert, they decide, even if the decision isn't really theirs. That's where reverse psychology slides in like a shadow. It doesn't beg, it doesn't persuade, it retreats intentionally, knowing full well that you'll chase. You probably wouldn't be interested. Don't worry about helping if it's too much trouble. You shouldn't take this risk. It's not for everyone. These aren't rejections. They're bait. Because once the brain detects limitation, it doesn't retreat. It revolts. And that rebellion feels like freedom. It feels like your idea. Manipulators wield this like a blade. Parents tell kids not to eat the vegetables. Suddenly they want them. Marketers label a product too exclusive for most people. Sales spike. Leaders feign doubt to spark urgency. Even in relationships, the phrase "you'd never understand" isn't surrender. It's a dare, a spark that forces the other person to prove you wrong. The brilliance of reverse psychology lies in its invisibility. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like agency, like defiance, like independence. But the entire time, your reaction was scripted, engineered, calculated. Because when someone tells you not to want something, your desire doesn't disappear. It intensifies. And suddenly, what once seemed optional now feels necessary because you chose it, or so you think. Frequency illusion. The frequency illusion is the psychological glitch that turns coincidence into obsession. It begins the moment something new enters your awareness. A word, a brand, a person, a thought. And then suddenly, you start seeing it everywhere. Billboards, conversations, social media, license plates. It feels like the universe is sending signals, like you've tapped into a hidden current pulsing beneath reality. But the truth is far simpler and far more manipulative. What's actually happening is your brain has been primed. Before, the information was there, but filtered out, dismissed as irrelevant noise. Now, your mind has tagged it as important, and your perception system, desperate to confirm its own relevance, starts scanning the world like a spotlight. What was once invisible becomes unavoidable, and every new sighting reinforces the illusion. See, it's happening again. Marketers, influencers, and manipulators exploit this ruthlessly. They plant a name, a phrase, a color scheme, then let your own psychology do the rest. You notice a trend and think, wow, everyone's into this now. But it's not everyone. It's you. It's your brain filtering the chaos into confirmation. You don't just see more of it. You feel like it's taking over. And that creates urgency, fear of missing out, a need to belong. This is how buzz is manufactured, how lies become common knowledge, how strangers start to feel familiar. The frequency illusion wraps coincidence in meaning, and once it grabs hold, your reality shifts. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And now everything looks different. Everywhere. Spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is the psychological time bomb buried in memory, an invisible force that doesn't just help you remember, but reshapes what you believe over time. It works not by shouting, but by returning, over and over, in perfectly timed waves. A message whispered once is easy to forget, but whispered again days later, then weeks later, months later, that message becomes part of you, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. The brain is built to forget what doesn't matter, but repetition, especially when spaced just right, tricks your mind into flagging information as important. The gap between exposures forces your memory to work, to retrieve, and in doing so, the information doesn't just stay longer, it roots deeper. It transforms from data into identity. This is how cults indoctrinate followers, how propaganda hardens into ideology, how brand loyalty is forged, not through volume, but through rhythm, through carefully placed echoes, a logo you see once a week, a slogan that shows up every other day, a belief repeated in passing, then again in a story, then again in a joke, until one day you're repeating it too. Persuaders use spaced repetition because it's the slow drip that eventually floods the room. It bypasses logic, wearing down resistance like water on stone. You don't notice the shift. You don't question the familiarity. And the more often you retrieve it, the more fluent it becomes. The more fluent it feels, the more true it seems. And by the time it's fully embedded, it doesn't feel like persuasion at all. It feels like your thought, your belief, your truth. Social proof loops. Social proof loops are the psychological echo chambers that make you believe something is popular because someone else believed it first. It's the reason people laugh louder in crowds, why we read the most liked comments, and why we follow trends we don't even like. At the heart of this technique is a single primal truth. Humans fear being wrong more than they fear being manipulated, and when in doubt, we look to others for permission. The loop begins with a small nudge, a few 5-star reviews, a fake line outside a store, a handful of influencers using the same hashtag. These early signals act as social proof, giving hesitant onlookers a sense of safety. If others are doing it, it must be okay. So more people join, more people notice, the numbers grow, the loop strengthens. It doesn't take much. A well-placed testimonial, a bestseller badge, a TikTok trend that looks organic, but what feels like discovery is actually design. The early adopters may not be real. The buzz may be artificial, but your brain doesn't check the source. It just sees motion, and motion feels like truth. Once the loop takes hold, it feeds itself. Every new follower validates the previous ones. Every purchase confirms the illusion of popularity. And you join in, not because you wanted to, but because it already looked chosen. By the time you realize you've been pulled into a loop, it's too late. The product is in your cart. The ideology is in your feed. The decision feels like yours, but the desire was planted, and the proof was manufactured. Persuasion is the invisible stage set before the persuasion even begins, the unseen priming of the mind that shapes how a message is received before it's delivered. It's not about what you say, it's about what they're already thinking when you say it. And when used deliberately, it's like hacking someone's perception in advance, softening the ground so your message lands with precision and power. This technique doesn't scream, it whispers in the background. It's the framed photo of a person climbing a mountain right before you pitch ambition. It's asking someone, "Are you open-minded?" right before presenting a controversial idea. It's arranging the environment, the mood, the moment, so that by the time you speak, the listener is already leaning in, already aligned, already tilted in your direction without knowing why. Persuasion is dangerous because it operates in the shadows. A single word, image, or question can shift someone's emotional state, open their mental gates, or narrow their attention, all before your real message appears. It doesn't change the message, it changes its meaning. Like dimming the lights before a confession, it warps the emotional lens through which everything is judged. Manipulators love this tool. They frame the context so precisely That agreement feels like instinct. They steer conversations with invisible reins. They don't fight resistance. They erase it before it arrives. And the victim? They never feel pushed, only convinced, only curious, only ready, because persuasion doesn't tell you what to think. It tells you what to be prepared to believe, and then it walks you straight there. Name-letter effect. The name-letter effect is a quiet, almost invisible bias that reaches deep into your subconscious and whispers, "This feels like me." It's the irrational pull you feel toward letters that appear in your own name, especially your initials, and it shapes your choices more than you dare to admit. You're more likely to favor people, brands, cities, and even careers that share your letters. And the craziest part? You don't even know you're doing it. This effect runs on the emotional current of identity. Your name is your most personal sound, your most familiar symbol, the word you've heard 1,000 times since birth. So when your brain encounters a letter tied to it, it lights up with warmth, comfort, and unconscious affinity. You think you're making a rational decision. You're not. You're choosing yourself. You're more likely to marry someone whose name starts with the same letter as yours, more likely to live in a city that starts with your initial, more likely to donate to hurricanes that share your first letter. It sounds absurd until you realize how deep identity seeps into perception. Persuaders use this subtly but powerfully. Personalized emails, targeted branding. "Hey name, this is for you." A name tag product feels more attractive. A business sharing your letter feels oddly trustworthy. You think you're seeing relevance. What you're really seeing is a mirror. The name letter effect doesn't shout. It nudges. It feels like intuition, but it's not magic. It's a glitch in the human operating system, one that anyone can exploit with a single keystroke. Scarcity framing. Scarcity framing is the art of making something feel valuable, not because of what it is, but because it might disappear. It weaponizes urgency. It hijacks your sense of loss. It whispers one of the most powerful triggers the brain can hear. You might miss out. And that fear of losing a chance, of being left behind, of watching something slip through your fingers, overrides logic in a heartbeat. This technique doesn't need substance. It needs limitation. Only 3 seats left. Last chance. Offer expires at midnight. These phrases light a fire in your emotional core. Even if you didn't want it before, you suddenly feel pulled, pressured, hooked. The brain starts screaming, "Act now," not because it's right, but because the window is closing. And once it closes, regret sets in. That regret is unbearable. Humans are wired to avoid loss more than we seek gain. This is why marketers frame things as "don't lose your spot" instead of "claim your reward." Why luxury brands sell exclusivity instead of quality. Why manipulators create false deadlines and limited availability, not to inform, but to manipulate your behavior before you have time to think. Scarcity framing doesn't just affect decisions. It rewrites desire. It transforms the ordinary into the irresistible simply because it won't last. And once you feel that tension in your gut, that racing pulse, that internal countdown, you're no longer evaluating. You're chasing, not the product, not the offer, but the escape from loss. Scarcity doesn't have to be real to work. It just has to feel like a door is about to slam, and your instinct will be to run through it. Framing effect. The framing effect is the emotional sleight of hand that changes your decision, not by changing the facts, but by changing how those facts are presented. It's not the truth that shifts, but the lens you're given to view it through. And once that lens is set, everything you see bends to its shape. The numbers stay the same. The message stays the same, but your reaction doesn't, because the frame is the manipulation. Tell someone a medical treatment has a 90% survival rate, and it sounds hopeful. Tell another it has a 10% death rate, and it sounds terrifying. The statistic is identical, but the feeling it triggers couldn't be more different. That's the framing effect. Emotions over facts. tone over logic. The angle becomes the answer. This technique is used everywhere by marketers, media, politicians, salespeople, and manipulators alike. Limited time offer creates urgency. Act now to avoid missing out. Triggers loss aversion. A processing fee sounds worse than a convenience charge, even when they cost the same. You're not reacting to what's true, you're reacting to how the truth was dressed up. Framing controls the narrative. It determines whether you're hopeful or afraid, empowered or ashamed. It plays on cognitive shortcuts, exploiting your need for context, your craving for clarity. And the worst part, once a frame is set, it becomes nearly impossible to unsee. You don't just accept it, you defend it. You think you chose, but really, the frame chose for you, and you said yes without even knowing the question had been rewritten. Peak-end rule. The peak-end rule is a distortion in memory so powerful it overrides the truth of an entire experience. Your brain doesn't remember how long something lasted or how consistent it was. It remembers two things: the most intense moment, the peak, and how it ended. Everything else gets blurred. Time fades, details vanish, but the emotional high or the crash and the final impression burn themselves in like scars or scripture. This is why one breathtaking moment can redeem a mediocre experience, why one painful incident can ruin a beautiful relationship, why the end of a movie matters more than the plot. Your mind edits life like a trailer, clipping out the boring parts, keeping only the moments that made you feel. Manipulators and master persuaders exploit this with precision. A negotiator creates friction throughout a meeting, then ends on a warm handshake and a generous concession. You walk away feeling great, even if you gave up too much. A brand designs its product experience to climax with a satisfying wow and finish on a rewarding message. You don't remember every second, but you remember how it peaked and how it left you. The peak-end rule is why apologies matter more at the end than the beginning. Why a thrilling moment can override an hour of monotony. It doesn't just shape how we remember things, it shapes how we decide what to repeat. If someone controls the peak and the end, they control the story you tell yourself, and the story is the reality your brain clings to, even when the rest was a lie. Reciprocity norm. The reciprocity norm is the invisible contract that governs human interaction, ancient, automatic, and deeply emotional. It's the rule that says, if someone gives you something, you owe them something in return, not because you agreed to it, not because you want to, but because your brain can't bear the discomfort of imbalance, and in that discomfort, influence takes root. Give someone a free sample and they feel compelled to buy. Offer a compliment and they feel pressure to return one. Do a small favor and suddenly the door opens to a larger request. This isn't kindness, this is leverage. Your generosity becomes a trap because once someone accepts your gesture, they're caught in the debt of politeness, of guilt, of social expectation. Manipulators thrive here. Salespeople hand you a gift before pitching a product. Cult recruiters overwhelm you with kindness and inclusion before introducing demands. Politicians offer relief, then ask for loyalty. The reciprocity isn't always material. It can be emotional, even spiritual. Make someone feel seen, validated, cared for, and they'll feel obligated to see you back, to give you something back, even if it hurts them. And it works because rejecting generosity feels wrong. It makes us feel like thieves, ungrateful, cold, so we give more than we should. Say yes when we want to say no. Accept deals, favors, relationships that aren't fair, just to restore balance. The reciprocity norm is powerful because it wraps manipulation in the mask of kindness. You don't see the strings, you just feel the pull, and by the time you realize it, you've already given something you never meant to offer. Temporal discounting is the psychological blindfold that makes us trade our future for fleeting comfort. It's the reason we procrastinate, the reason we choose fast food over fitness, debt over discipline, pleasure now over peace later. At its core, temporal discounting is the brain's tendency to undervalue rewards that are far away in time, even if they're bigger, better, or more meaningful. And the closer a reward is, the more seductive it becomes. You know what's good for you, but the instant something immediate appears, something you can touch, taste, feel now, your brain tilts. It whispers, just once, just today, just this time. And so we pick the donut over the diet, the impulse buy over the savings plan, the toxic text over silence, because the future feels abstract while the present is burning in our hands. This vulnerability is ruthlessly exploited. Marketers promise instant access. Credit cards offer buy now, pay later. Addictive apps dangle quick dopamine. Every tool of persuasion aimed at you knows this. If they offer now and your reward is later, they win. Temporal discounting makes us slaves to urgency. It turns visionaries into victims. And worst of all, it convinces us we're making a rational choice. But you're not choosing between good and bad, you're choosing between now and someday. And your brain is tragically biased toward the short-term hit. The pain of patience is quiet. The pleasure of immediacy screams. And every time you listen to that scream, your future gets sold a little cheaper. Choice architecture. Choice architecture is the invisible hand that guides decisions, not by limiting your freedom, but by shaping how your options are presented. It's not about what you choose. It's about how the environment, the layout, the sequence, the defaults, all silently push you toward one decision while making it feel like your own. You think you're in control. You're not. You've been architected. The power lies in the structure. Put the healthy salad at eye level and the junk food on the bottom shelf. Suddenly people choose better. Highlight one pricing plan with a glowing box, and that becomes the favorite. Auto-enroll someone in a program with an option to opt out, and most will stay in. Nothing was forced. Every path was open, but the design made one path easier, smoother, inevitable. Choice architecture exploits human laziness, decision fatigue, fear of regret. It uses order, color, wording, proximity, and timing to funnel behavior without alerting the brain that anything's being manipulated. Governments use it to increase organ donors. Tech companies use it to capture more screen time. Scammers use it to walk you through consent screens that were never in your interest to begin with. The most terrifying part is how gentle it feels. There's no pressure, no pitch, just a form, a layout, a sequence of buttons, and yet it shapes outcomes on a massive scale. It gets you to buy what you didn't want, sign what you didn't read, accept what you barely understood. You were given a choice, but the architecture chose how you choose, and you didn't even notice. Authority bias. Authority bias is the reflexive obedience hardwired into your brain, the invisible urge to defer, obey, and believe anyone who looks like they're in charge. It's not about truth, it's about power. When someone wears a lab coat, speaks with certainty, flashes a title, or stands behind a podium, the mind instinctively lowers its guard, not because what they're saying is valid, but because they seem like they know better. This effect is ancient, it's tribal. For most of human history, survival depended on obeying the leader, following the elder, trusting the one who claimed knowledge. And even today, that instinct remains. Studies have shown people will follow dangerous orders, agree with flawed logic, and override their own morals, simply because the command came from someone perceived as an authority. Marketers know this. So do politicians, cult leaders, and fake experts on social media. They dress the part. They use titles. They drop credentials. They speak in polished certainty, not to inform, but to control, and you comply, not because you've thought critically, but because the presence of authority feels safe. This is how misinformation spreads, how abuse of power thrives, how we swallow lies without flinching because they came in a doctor's voice, a teacher's tone, a CEO's suit. Authority doesn't have to be real to be effective. It just has to look real. The mind wants to believe that someone else has the answers, and the moment you stop questioning, the moment you defer, your choices are no longer yours. They belong to the person holding the illusion of command. Salience bias. Salience bias is the mental spotlight that blinds you to truth by making what's loudest, brightest, or most emotionally charged feel like what matters most. It doesn't care about facts. It doesn't care about frequency. It only cares about what stands out. And once something grabs your attention, your brain starts treating it like it's important, whether it is or not. This is why we fear plane crashes more than car accidents. Why shocking headlines drown out boring realities. Why the one negative comment sticks with you more than 100 compliments. Salience bias hijacks your attention and your judgment by dragging your focus to what feels urgent, dramatic, or memorable. Manipulators love this. News outlets push sensational stories not because they're the most relevant, but because they're the most clickable. Politicians weaponize vivid threats, not data. Marketers use bright colors, bold claims, and emotional imagery to flood your senses and override your logic. They know that once something is salient, once it spikes your emotional radar, it dominates your decision-making. Even in relationships, salience bias plays dirty. One act of cruelty overshadows months of kindness. One grand romantic gesture blinds you to toxic patterns. What you notice begins to feel like the whole truth, but it's not. It's just what your mind latched onto in the moment. And here's the trap. What's most visible often feels most real, but what's most real is often invisible. Salience bias doesn't reveal the truth. It distorts it by making the loudest thing in the room feel like the only thing that matters. Color psychology. Color psychology is the silent manipulator woven into every room you enter, every ad you scroll past, every decision you think you made freely. You didn't choose that product just because it looked good. You chose it because its color spoke to your nervous system, without a word, without permission, because color doesn't ask. It triggers, it seeps into the brain and rewires mood, perception, and trust before logic ever enters the room. Red ignites urgency. It raises your heart rate. It screams, buy now, act fast, pay attention. Blue calms, earning trust, whispering secure, reliable, true. Yellow is energy. Green feels natural, balanced, alive. Black seduces with power. White offers innocence. Purple implies luxury. Every hue speaks a secret emotional dialect, and the mind listens. Marketers saturate your world in color for this reason. Fast food chains use red and yellow to spike hunger and speed. Hospitals lean into cool blues to reduce anxiety. Luxury brands plunge into black and gold to suggest status, exclusivity, dominance. These aren't aesthetic choices, they are psychological weapons. Even your behavior changes with color. A red button gets more clicks. A green light feels safer. A dark room quiets rebellion. A white lab coat commands belief. Colors aren't decoration. They are command signals to your subconscious, and you follow them without knowing why. You think you're in control, but sometimes all it takes to change your mind, your mood, or your decision is the color on a wall, a screen, a shirt, and your brain obeys quietly every single time. Proximity, persuasion. Proximity, persuasion is the unspoken influence of closeness. How simply being near someone can soften their defenses, deepen trust, and pull them toward agreement without a single word being spoken. It's not always about touch or conversation. It's about presence. Presence that lingers just long enough to feel familiar. Presence that blurs the line between stranger and ally. Humans are wired for connection, and proximity is the shortcut. Studies show people are more likely to form friendships, fall in love, or trust others who occupy the same spaces, same desk clusters, apartment floors, hallways, even Zoom windows. The mind, desperate to feel safe, takes physical nearness as a cue. They must be okay. The more we see someone, the more we accept them, even if we don't know why. Persuaders weaponize this silently. A salesperson who leans in just enough, a coworker who always seems to share your lunch break, a stranger who sits beside you instead of across. Their closeness is calculated, not invasive, just intentional, just enough to make you feel like you've seen them before, like they belong. And once that illusion sets in, your resistance drops. In digital life, proximity looks like repeated exposure. The same influencer in your feed, the same ad before every video. Familiarity, disguised as relevance. Your brain equates, "I keep seeing this," with "this must matter." Proximity. Persuasion doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply shows up, again and again, until your guard crumbles and you start to feel something you can't explain. Comfort, openness, agreement, eye contact illusion. The eye contact illusion is a primal trigger buried deep inside your brain, an ancient signal that says, "This person sees me." When someone locks eyes with you, even for a moment, it activates a flood of unconscious emotions: connection, trust, tension, sometimes even fear. And in persuasion, it becomes a weapon, because the brain doesn't know how to separate genuine intimacy from strategic gaze. It just responds. When someone holds your gaze, your pulse quickens, your attention locks in, you feel seen, targeted, important, and that feeling makes their message more believable, their presence more magnetic. Leaders use it. Salespeople train for it. Manipulators master it. Eye contact is read by the mind as honesty, even when it's calculated. But here's where the illusion deepens. The eyes don't need to be real. A photo, a video, even the suggestion of eye contact triggers the same response. That's why news anchors stare down the lens, why political ads use head-on portraits, why apps and avatars are designed with pupils that look right at you. The illusion of connection is just as persuasive as the real thing. And once that connection forms, even through a screen, your defenses soften. Your skepticism fades. You feel like they understand you, like they know something about you. But the truth is, they're using one of the oldest human reflexes against you. The eyes may be the window to the soul, but in the wrong hands, they're also the front door to your trust. And all it takes to unlock it is a stare that doesn't blink. Voice pitch influence. Voice pitch influence is the subconscious sway of sound, how the tone, depth, and frequency of a voice can bend your perception before your conscious mind even catches up. It's not just what someone says, it's how they say it. And the pitch of a voice can make a person feel trustworthy, dominant, soothing, or suspicious within seconds, without evidence, without reason, just vibration. Low-pitched voices are often interpreted as authoritative, competent, even powerful. Politicians lower their voices during debates. CEOs drop their pitch when announcing major decisions. Your brain hears that deeper resonance and assumes control, wisdom, certainty. It doesn't stop to question the content, it reacts to the sound. This is why people instinctively lean toward leaders with lower vocal registers, even when their words say nothing new. Higher-pitched voices, on the other hand, can signal warmth, urgency, excitement, or anxiety. In sales, it's used to create enthusiasm, to generate energy. In manipulation, it's used to convey vulnerability, to pull on empathy. Raise your pitch just slightly, and suddenly, people feel like you need them. That emotional tug can drive decisions far more than logic ever will. Even silence in pitch, the rhythm, the pauses, alters meaning. A flat tone can deaden even the most powerful words. A well-timed vocal shift can make the mundane sound life-changing. Your voice becomes the emotion behind the message. and people don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. Voice pitch influence bypasses intellect. It goes straight to instinct, and once it takes root, the decision is made, the judgment is formed, all before the words even land. Clothing cues. Clothing cues are silent commands, unspoken symbols of power, status, trust, and belonging that bypass logic and speak directly to the primal part of your brain. Before a word is spoken, before a hand is shaken, you've already decided how much authority, respect, or attention someone deserves, and most of that decision came from what they're wearing. The human mind is brutally visual. It craves shortcuts, and clothing is one of the fastest. A tailored suit signals competence. A lab coat triggers trust. A uniform demands obedience. These aren't just style choices. They're visual triggers that activate belief systems. You don't question the pilot in uniform. You listen to the man in the white coat. You follow the leader in heels and navy blue. Your judgment has already been shaped, and you don't even realize it. Manipulators exploit this with precision. A scammer in a blazer feels like a consultant. A fraudster in scrubs becomes a healer. A cult leader in ceremonial garb becomes divine. The clothing doesn't change who they are, it changes how you see them. And once your brain accepts the costume, it accepts the character. Even subtle cues matter. A luxury watch, a press collar, a branded tote bag. Each piece tells a story your subconscious eats up. It doesn't ask, is this true? It asks, does this look right? And if the image fits, the belief follows. Clothing cues manipulate perception instantly, not with words, but with fabric. And in a world where appearance is often louder than reality, what someone wears may shape your choices more than anything they say. Interruption, patterning. Interruption patterning is a psychological jolt, a sudden deliberate break in expectation that shakes the brain out of autopilot and yanks attention into the present moment. It's the moment something feels off, and that feeling makes your mind lock in, hyper-aware, even vulnerable. Our brains are wired for rhythm, for predictability. We crave patterns because they help us conserve energy. So when someone disrupts that rhythm intentionally, they create a gap. And in that gap, persuasion floods in. This is how cult recruiters snap people into focus with confusing questions, how hypnotists break resistance by interrupting thought mid-sentence, how marketers grab you with bizarre headlines, unexpected visuals, or strange phrasing. You stop scrolling, you tilt your head, the brain doesn't know what to do, and that uncertainty makes it listen harder. It becomes suggestible. In conversation, interruption patterning might be a sudden pause, a word out of place, a surprising gesture. It doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be unexpected. That breach in normalcy triggers a split-second vulnerability, and that's when influence slides in, subtle but sharp. Even emotionally, this technique works. Imagine someone goes from angry to silent, or from calm to laughter. The change is jarring, and the human mind, desperate to reorient, becomes highly responsive. You start looking for cues. You become open because you want to resolve the tension. Interruption breaks the trance of routine, and in that disruption, the persuader writes a new script, one they've prepared, one they control, and now you're listening because nothing else makes sense. Yet, vividness effect. The vividness effect is the reason your brain clings to the dramatic and forgets the dull, even when the dull is what's true. It's a mental distortion that makes vivid, emotionally charged details feel more real, more important, more believable, not because they're accurate, but because they're intense, colorful, alive. The brain doesn't weigh facts, it reacts to feelings, and vividness turns a whisper of information into a scream. Tell someone that 0.01% of people suffer from a rare reaction and they nod. Tell them about Sarah, a mother of two, who collapsed in a grocery store after taking that exact medication,
and they panic. The statistics didn't change. The reality didn't change. But now the story has a face, a name, a heartbeat, and suddenly the mind elevates it above all else. Persuaders exploit this constantly. Politicians don't quote data. They tell stories of veterans, victims, heroes. Advertisers don't just show features. They show a man dancing in the rain because his shoes kept him dry. Even con artists rely on vivid details. They describe the office they work in, the street they live on, the sound of the dog barking in the background, so it feels real. The more vivid the detail, the more likely your brain will treat it as truth, even if it's fiction, even if it's manipulation. And while boring facts evaporate, vivid lies harden into belief. The vividness effect doesn't just color the truth, it replaces it. Because once your mind grabs onto the emotional image, it refuses to let go of the feeling that came with it, even when logic tries to intervene. Nudging defaults. Nudging defaults is the art of silent persuasion, where simply setting the default option steers decisions without force, without words, and often without awareness. It's not coercion, it's not suggestion, it's pure psychological gravity, and it works because most people don't choose what they want. They accept what they're given, especially if it feels like the standard, the norm, the safe choice. Your brain loves defaults. They reduce friction. They imply expertise. They whisper, this must be the best option. It's already selected. Opt-out organ donation programs save more lives than opt-in. Retirement plans with automatic enrollment have dramatically higher participation. App permissions, subscription trials, even product add-ons. When they're pre-checked, people say yes simply by doing nothing. Why? Because choosing requires effort. Because rejecting a default feels risky. Because the very presence of a default sends a message. Someone decided this was right. And going against that, especially in a moment of indecision, feels like defiance. Manipulators use this constantly. That auto-ticked box for email updates, the pre-selected most popular pricing tier, the cancellation process buried under layers of clicks. You think you're making free choices, but the game was rigged before you arrived. Nudging defaults doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it simply sits there, looking official, waiting for your unconscious consent. And the terrifying part is how effective it is, not because it convinces, but because it removes resistance. You don't weigh the options, you don't question the outcome, you just move forward. The choice felt easy, but it wasn't yours. It was nudged from the very beginning. Micro yes ladder. The micro yes ladder is the art of leading someone to a major commitment, one tiny, almost imperceptible agreement at a time. It doesn't start with a bold ask. It starts with a whisper, a nod, a harmless sure. And each of those small yeses forms a step, upward, inward, until they're standing at the top, saying yes to something they never planned on, not because they were tricked, but because they walked themselves there. The mind craves consistency. Once you say yes to something, even something trivial, you unconsciously reshape your self-image to match. I agreed to this. I must be okay with it. I must be that kind of person. Each yes rewires the narrative. Each step lowers resistance. So when the final real ask arrives, it doesn't feel foreign. It feels like the natural next move. Skilled persuaders build these ladders without their target noticing. Can I ask you a quick question? Would you say you value honesty? Do you agree that everyone deserves a voice? Every micro yes is a psychological handshake, innocent on its own, but sticky in sequence. By the time the real favor or offer drops, your brain feels committed. To say no would now create dissonance, discomfort, self-betrayal. This technique shows up in sales scripts, political speeches, cult indoctrinations, even first dates. It feels like connection, it feels like trust, but it's often choreography, carefully staged agreement, rising step by step until refusal no longer feels like an option. Because the final yes wasn't forced. You gave it. willingly. After all, you'd already said yes. Effective forecasting errors. Effective forecasting errors are the cruel joke your brain plays on you every time you try to predict how you'll feel in the future. You think you'll be ecstatic if you get the promotion, crushed if the relationship ends, fulfilled when you finally buy the thing you've been saving for. But you're wrong, not because your emotions are fake, but because your brain is a terrible fortune teller. It consistently overestimates the impact, intensity, and duration of future feelings, and that error is a goldmine for persuasion. We make decisions based not on what we want now, but how we think something will make us feel later. Manipulators know this, so they sell you fantasies. They don't pitch the gym, they pitch the pride you'll feel in front of the mirror. They don't sell the car, they sell the wind in your hair, the envy in others' eyes. They feed your imagination, and your imagination lies to you. You believe the high will last forever, that the regret will ruin you, that if you don't act now, you'll suffer. But the truth is, we adapt fast. That surge of happiness fades, that crushing disappointment becomes a footnote, and yet we keep forecasting our emotions as if they're permanent. This is how urgency is manufactured, how guilt is exploited, how future joy or dread is sold like a product. Your brain shows you a vivid emotional movie, and you buy the ticket, even if the ending never comes. You think you're planning, but you're gambling with feelings that may never exist, and someone else is holding the deck. Narrative transportation. Narrative transportation is the psychological escape hatch that turns a story into a spell, pulling you out of your reality and placing you inside someone else's. Once it takes hold, logic dissolves, skepticism softens, your guard drops, because when a story is vivid enough, immersive enough, emotional enough, you don't just hear it, you live it. And while you're inside it, you're persuadable in ways you'd never allow when fully awake. It begins with the brain's deep hunger for narrative. Since childhood, we've been wired to respond to characters, tension, emotion, and resolution. A good story isn't entertainment, it's a simulation. The limbic system can't tell the difference between imagined danger and real danger, between fictional joy and lived joy. That's why your heart races during a movie, why you cry over someone who never existed, why you walk away from a story changed. This is the exact moment persuaders wait for. Politicians don't argue with data. They tell you about Maria, a single mother who worked 3 jobs. Marketers don't sell features. They tell stories of lives transformed. Manipulators tell you about their painful past, their heroic struggles, their redemptive arc, all while threading their message into the emotion you're now trapped inside. Because when you're emotionally transported, you stop evaluating the message. You stop questioning the motive. You feel and you follow. And by the time the story ends, you've already absorbed its lesson, its call to action, its hidden ask. The door back to reality is still open, but something inside you hesitates, because that story, it felt like it belonged to you. Sensory cues. Sensory cues are the invisible threads that pull your emotions without permission. Sights, sounds, smells, textures, even tastes that slip past your conscious mind and anchor themselves deep in your subconscious. They don't ask you to think, they make you feel. And in persuasion, emotion is everything. A warm scent, vanilla, cinnamon, citrus, can make a store feel comforting and safe. Gentle background music can make you linger longer, spend more, trust more. A rough texture can make a product feel sturdier. A soft one can make you feel vulnerable, nostalgic. These cues are never announced. They just exist, saturating your senses until your decisions start to drift. Your brain evolved in a world where sensory input meant survival. A sudden sound meant danger. A familiar smell meant safety. Those reflexes haven't gone away. They've just been hijacked. Luxury brands use this with silk packaging, ambient lighting, and deep
moody sense. Politicians use background music to stir pride or urgency. Even cult leaders control the color of walls, the lighting in a room, the softness of the carpet, because every detail changes how you feel, and how you feel shapes what you believe. Sensory cues don't need logic, they bypass resistance. You walk into a room and feel at ease, so you trust the people in it. You smell coffee and suddenly feel warm, open, ready to talk. You hear the right tone of voice and you drop your guard. Nothing has been said, but something has been triggered. And once a feeling is triggered, behavior follows, not because you decided, but because your senses were persuaded before your mind even had the chance to speak. Placebo words. Placebo words are linguistic sugar pills, harmless on the surface, but secretly powerful in how they make people feel more convinced, more secure, more likely to comply. These words don't change the meaning of a message, they change the experience of it. They make a weak argument sound solid, a shaky request feel justified. They create the illusion of reason, authority, and logic without ever actually providing any. The most infamous of these is the word because. When slipped into a sentence, it triggers a mental reflex, the expectation of a reason. But the brain isn't picky. It doesn't wait to evaluate what comes after. It just sees the structure of logic, and that's enough. Say, can I cut in line because I need to make a copy? And people agree. Say, can I cut in line because it's an emergency? And they agree at the same rate. The word because is the key. What follows barely matters. Other placebo words carry the same effect. Studies show, experts agree, according to science, guaranteed. These phrases soothe doubt, create authority, and plant certainty, even if there's no study, no expert, no guarantee. They function like a verbal tranquilizer, quieting the skeptical part of your brain just long enough to slip the message through. Manipulators know that people don't always need proof. They just need the shape of proof. A few magic words, a confident tone, a structure that feels like logic. And once those words are spoken, the mind relaxes. The guard drops, not because it's convinced, but because it's been comforted. Humor disarmament. Humor disarmament is the psychological sneak attack that makes people let their guard down while they're busy laughing. It's not about being funny. It's about using laughter as a weapon, a soft, charming, seemingly harmless weapon that loosens resistance, lowers suspicion, and opens the door to influence. When someone makes you laugh, your brain shifts from defense to delight, and in that moment of delight, you become persuadable. Humor triggers warmth. It releases endorphins, reduces cortisol, and creates a surge of connection. You feel relaxed, safe, seen, and the person making you laugh suddenly feels trustworthy, even if you barely know them. This is why comedians can talk about taboo topics without backlash, why charming manipulators get away with cruelty, why salespeople crack jokes before talking numbers. The moment they make you laugh, they're in, and you're open. Humor also creates distance from discomfort. A joke about a sensitive topic can shift the emotional tone and sneak in ideas that would otherwise provoke resistance. It reframes the situation. A jab wrapped in wit feels less threatening. A harsh truth coated in sarcasm feels more digestible. You don't just hear the message, you accept it, because it made you feel good. Even in conflict, humor disarms. A clever remark diffuses tension. A well-timed smile melts anger, and suddenly both sides lean in. Laughter rewires the dynamic. It equalizes power. It rewrites intent. Humor, disarmament isn't always innocent. It's a Trojan horse, and by the time you realize the message it carried, it's already inside your gates, smiling, casual, and completely unforgettable. Fear, then relief. Fear, then relief is a psychological ambush, one that grips the mind with sudden tension, then releases it just enough to create vulnerability. It begins with fear, a threat, a warning, a jolt to your nervous system. Your heart races, your muscles tighten, your brain floods with adrenaline and prepares to fight or flee. And then nothing happens. The danger vanishes, relief floods in, and in that fragile moment, when the fear has just been lifted, your defenses are disarmed. That's when persuasion strikes. This technique works because fear heightens awareness. It scrambles your logical processing, and when that fear is suddenly removed, you don't return to calm, you drop below it, into confusion, into gratitude, into an emotional freefall where you're searching for something to hold on to. Anything, even the very person who just frightened you. Scammers use it with fake threats. Your account is compromised. Then, we've recovered it, just confirm your info. Interrogators use it, accusations followed by sudden kindness. Abusers use it, bursts of rage followed by affection. Salespeople do it too. This offer expires in 30 seconds. Then, just kidding, you've still got time. And you feel grateful, manipulated but unaware. The power of fear. Then relief isn't in the threat. It's in the aftershock, in the lull where your mind wants to reward the source of safety, even if it was also the source of panic. You want to say yes. You want to agree. You feel like something's been given to you, but it hasn't. It's been taken and returned, only after you've been rewired. Disruption restore pattern. The disruption restore pattern is psychological whiplash, an intentional break in emotional or cognitive flow that jolts the mind into alertness, followed by a soothing return to normal that feels like relief. And in that relief, persuasion quietly enters. The brain, stunned by the break, reaches for stability. When you offer that stability, you gain influence, not through pressure, but through control of the emotional rhythm. First comes the disruption, an awkward pause, a strange phrase, a sudden change in tone, something that doesn't belong, something that short-circuits expectation. Your audience flinches, even slightly. They lean in trying to make sense of it. Their brain kicks into gear, and in that heightened state of awareness, they become intensely receptive. Then comes the restore, a smile, a joke, a return to safety, and their brain floods with relief. Confusion fades, and what follows next feels good, trustworthy, anchored. That's the trick. You create the tension and then resolve it, and the person you're persuading associates you with the comfort, the savior, the one who made the weirdness go away. Manipulators use this in sales, therapy, even cult initiation. Break the rhythm, then deliver the message. Shock, then soothe. The brain remembers how it felt to be restored, not how it was disrupted. And that emotional contrast, tension followed by calm, makes everything feel more vivid, more meaningful, more believable. The pattern rewires attention. It slips past the mental firewall. It makes persuasion feel like safety, even when it began with confusion. And once someone feels rescued by you, they stop resisting. They start following. Inoculation effect. The inoculation effect is psychological immunity, built not by shielding someone from opposing ideas, but by exposing them to weak versions first. Just like a vaccine introduces a harmless strain of a virus to train the body to fight the real thing, this persuasion technique plants a soft, watered-down challenge to your beliefs so your mind becomes prepared to defend them when a real threat appears. And the terrifying part, once inoculated, you don't just resist the attack, you become more convinced of what you already believed. This is how cults reinforce loyalty, how political campaigns build resilience, how ideologies are fortified. The persuader says, you'll hear people claim this is a scam, but here's why that's wrong. Or, some will tell you this doesn't work. They're misinformed. You feel like you've seen both sides, like you've done your thinking, but you haven't. You've been trained, armed with rebuttals before the opposition ever speaks. The brilliance of the inoculation effect is that it makes you feel independent while you're being pre-programmed. The more you engage with the weak counter-argument,
the more emotionally invested you become in defending your belief. Your identity fuses with your position, and once that happens, facts become irrelevant. Logic bounces off you like rubber, because now resistance feels like strength. It's subtle, strategic, and deeply manipulative. You don't notice the setup, you just feel righteous when the real challenge comes, and you already know how to crush it. You think you're immune to persuasion, but that immunity was given to you by the first person who warned you what others would say. Liking bias. Liking bias is the softest manipulation and one of the most dangerous because it doesn't feel like persuasion. It feels like connection. It works by wrapping influence in warmth, charm, familiarity. If you like someone, you trust them. You agree with them. You say yes, not because the facts line up, but because your heart already has. And once someone has your heart, your mind will follow. We're more easily persuaded by people we find attractive, funny, relatable, or charismatic. The product didn't change. The face behind it did. This is why endorsements work, why cult leaders smile, why your favorite influencer can get you to buy a brand you don't need. When we like someone, we lower our defenses. We project good intentions onto them. We give them the benefit of the doubt. The liking bias isn't always rational. You might like someone because they look like you, because they went to your school, because they remind you of someone from childhood. These tiny details flick switches in your subconscious. You think you're being objective, but your emotional brain already casts its vote. Manipulators engineer likability. They mirror your posture. They laugh at your jokes. They compliment without being obvious. They show vulnerability. All of it is designed to get you to like them, because once that happens, resistance collapses. You trust their advice, defend their flaws, forgive their manipulation. You want to believe them, and in persuasion, wanting to believe is more powerful than any argument. Liking bias makes betrayal feel personal, but by then, you've already given them permission. Smiling, willing, wide open. Mystery hooks. Mystery hooks are the irresistible black holes of attention, open loops that tease the brain with the promise of revelation, but withhold just enough to leave you suspended, obsessed, waiting. They're not just storytelling tricks, they're psychological snares, because once the mind senses an unanswered question, it cannot let go. It needs closure, and until it gets it, it clings, replays, wonders. That tension, that's where persuasion lives. You won't believe what happened next. She said one word that changed everything. There's one thing they're not telling you. These aren't just phrases. They're triggers. They provoke curiosity, discomfort, anticipation. The brain kicks into overdrive, trying to resolve the unknown. And during that search, your skepticism shuts down. You're not analyzing the message, you're chasing the answer. This is why clickbait works, why movie trailers never show the twist, why speakers begin with a shocking anecdote and say, "We'll come back to that." The delay hurts, but you lean in. And while you're leaning, you're vulnerable. A message delivered mid-hook enters deeper. It feels earned, it feels meaningful, even if it's manipulative. Mystery hooks also rewire memory. The story you didn't finish stays longer in your head than the one you understood. The punchline you had to wait for hits harder. The idea wrapped in mystery plants itself deeper because your brain had to work for it. And when you finally get the answer, your mind doesn't just absorb it, it owns it. Mystery creates motion. It turns passive listeners into active seekers, and once you're seeking, you're already under the spell. Labeling technique. The labeling technique is the manipulation of identity through language, a subtle yet piercing way to shape someone's behavior by telling them who they are. It doesn't ask, it doesn't suggest, it declares, it names you, and once you've been named, your brain scrambles to make it true, not for them, for you. Humans are desperate to act in ways that match their identity. If someone tells you, "You're the kind of person who always helps others," a part of you wants to be that person. If someone calls you generous, honest, reliable, those words don't just describe, they prescribe. They become a mirror you feel pressure to live up to, and that pressure can be gently twisted into compliance. This technique is disarming because it sounds like flattery. I can tell you're a careful decision maker. You seem like someone who doesn't fall for gimmicks. These aren't compliments, they're traps, because the moment you accept the label, your future actions are pulled toward it like gravity. You don't want to contradict yourself. You don't want to shatter the version of you that someone just reflected back. Salespeople use this. Politicians use it. Cults use it. Even loved ones use it. You've always been the strong one in this family. It feels good, empowering, but it's shaping you, guiding you, cornering you, and the more personal the label, the deeper it digs into your self-image. The labeling technique doesn't shout. It whispers, "This is who you are," and if you're not careful, you'll spend your choices trying to prove it without ever realizing you never chose that identity to begin with. Sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is the emotional trap that chains you to bad decisions, not because they're right, but because you've already paid for them. It doesn't matter if it's money, time, love, energy, or your own pride. Once you've invested something into a person, a path, a plan, walking away feels like failure. Even when staying hurts more, even when the future screams leave, your brain tells you, "But I've come this far, but I can't waste what I've given. But what if it turns around?" This is not logic, it's desperation dressed as loyalty, and manipulators know exactly how to exploit it. They get you to commit just a little, then a little more, then they remind you of what you've already done. You've already put in so much. You've already waited this long. They anchor you in your past so they can control your future. This fallacy is why people stay in toxic relationships, broken careers, doomed projects. It's why gamblers chase losses, why you finish a movie you hate, why you keep arguing when you already know you're wrong. The more you invest, the tighter the grip. The more pain you endure, the harder it is to admit it was for nothing. But that's the lie, that walking away erases what you gave. It doesn't. What's gone is already gone. But your future, that's still yours, unless someone else convinces you that staying stuck is strength, that loyalty means self-abandonment, that sacrifice is always noble. It's not. Sometimes the bravest choice is the one that breaks your own illusion and lets you walk away. Fear of missing out. Fear of missing out, FOMO, is the emotional panic button that makes people say yes before they think, agree before they understand, and leap before they look. It taps into something primal, the terror of being left behind, left out, irrelevant, forgotten. It doesn't persuade with logic. It claws at insecurity, and once that fear is lit, reason burns away. FOMO is a weapon of urgency, the flash sale that ends in an hour, the exclusive invite you weren't supposed to see, the event everyone is talking about. These aren't just offers, they're threats, not overt, but emotional. You're not told what you'll gain, you're haunted by what you'll lose. The feeling that while you hesitate, others are living, thriving, winning, that you're stuck on the outside looking in. Marketers know this, cult leaders know this, social media was built on this, the limited drop, the disappearing post, the countdown clock. These are not tools, they are triggers. They simulate scarcity, they manufacture popularity, they whisper, act now or regret forever. And it works, because missing out feels like rejection, like failure, like erasure. Your nervous system doesn't know it's a marketing campaign. It thinks it's a survival threat. Belonging is at stake. Status, identity. FOMO doesn't need to prove anything. It only needs to suggest that others are already doing it, already winning, already inside. And with every second that passes, you're not. You feel it like a pulse in your gut. And suddenly, you click, you agree, you comply. Not because you wanted to, but because fear whispered, what if this was your chance and you missed it? Reframing pain as investment, reframing pain as investment is the manipulation of suffering, turning struggle into justification, turning sacrifice into proof that it was all worth it. It hijacks your need for meaning, your fear of wasted effort, and whispers, "You didn't endure all that for nothing. It must be valuable because it hurt." And once pain becomes an investment, you protect it like property. This technique doesn't erase pain, it weaponizes it. The more exhausted you are, the more they tell you you're earning something. The more you suffer, the more they convince you you're transforming. You stayed up all night working? That means you're dedicated. You stuck through a brutal relationship? That means it's real. You suffered for this product, this program, this person. Then surely it must be worth the price. Your brain buys this because the alternative is unbearable. If the pain was for nothing, it means you were manipulated, weak, wrong. But if the pain was an investment, then it was power. You endured, you grew, you paid for something that others didn't. And now you feel entitled to a reward, which makes you double down, commit harder, go deeper. Cult leaders use this. Coaches, abusers, marketers, they push you until it hurts, then tell you the pain is the proof, that discomfort is the doorway, that struggle equals transformation, and you want to believe them, because otherwise you suffered for no reason, and that hurts more than anything else. So you stay, you sacrifice more, you call the pain progress, because you've already paid too much to walk away. Power of because. The power of because is one of the most deceptively simple and frighteningly effective persuasion techniques, because it taps directly into the brain's craving for reasons, even when those reasons are hollow. It doesn't matter how valid the explanation is. The word because acts like a permission slip, a justification, a signal that what follows has meaning. And the moment we hear it, our resistance starts to soften. In a now famous study, researchers found that people were far more likely to let someone cut in line at a copier if they simply used the word because, even when the reason made no sense. "Can I cut in because I need to make copies?" The request was absurd, but the compliance soared. Why? Because the brain doesn't analyze the reason. It registers the structure of justification. It hears because and assumes logic must follow. Manipulators use this constantly. Buy now because supplies are limited. Join today because you deserve more. Trust me because I've done this before. The explanations may be weak, circular, or emotionally loaded, but the word because creates an illusion of rationale, a feeling of reason, not the reality of it. And that illusion is all it takes. Your brain doesn't want to think, it wants to resolve. Because ties the knot, it closes the loop, it gives the mind a sense of completion, even if the foundation is paper thin. You think you agreed with the logic, but really, you obeyed the structure of logic. The word itself was the spell, and you never saw it coming. Visual metaphors. Visual metaphors are the silent storytellers that bypass language and logic, embedding meaning straight into the emotional core of the brain. They're not just symbols, they're shortcuts. A chain around a wrist, a cracked mask, a wolf in sheep's clothing. One image, just one, can say what paragraphs of text never could. And once you see it, you feel it, instantly, viscerally, permanently. The brain evolved to respond to visuals before words. Before we could write, we could draw. Before we could explain, we could show. That primal wiring never left us. This is why propaganda posters haunt, why advertisements use broken wings for failure and light for salvation. It's why a melting clock doesn't just show time, it shows anxiety, dread, loss. Metaphors take emotion and carve it into form. In persuasion, this is a weapon. A politician stands in front of a crumbling bridge. A nonprofit shows an empty bowl. A brand displays a phoenix rising from ash. You're not just looking, you're interpreting, feeling, believing. The message becomes yours. Your mind fills in the gaps. And because you connected the dots, the idea roots even deeper. Visual metaphors are used to sell hope, fear, trust, rage. They appear in logos, album covers, protest signs, campaign ads, and their power lies in simplicity. The image doesn't argue, it declares. It doesn't debate, it delivers. You can resist a slogan, you can question a fact, but you can't unsee an image that hits your nerves like a memory. It becomes a truth without words, a belief without permission, a mirror you didn't know you were holding.
Chunking information. Chunking information is the mental shortcut that makes persuasion stick by shrinking the overwhelming into the manageable. It's not about simplifying content, it's about packaging it, taking sprawling, complex ideas and breaking them into bite-sized, digestible units that make the brain relax and say, I can handle this. Our minds are built to fear overload. Too much input triggers anxiety, indecision, paralysis. But when information is grouped, 3 steps, 5 tips, 7 rules, it suddenly feels doable, memorable, safe. Chunking doesn't just help us understand, it creates the illusion of clarity, of mastery, of truth. Persuaders use this constantly. Marketers don't give you 20 features, they give you 3 reasons why this works. Public speakers don't ramble, they break ideas into numbered points. Cult leaders, therapists, influencers, they all chunk. They all frame complexity as order. And the moment that order appears, the listener breathes easier, and compliance rises. Even the rhythm of speech is chunked, pauses, cadence, lists in 3s. The brain loves patterns. It latches onto symmetry and repetition like a lifeline. You remember messages better when they're chunked. You believe them more. They feel refined, professional, complete. And this illusion of simplicity seduces you into trust. You stop questioning what's missing. You stop looking past the structure because it feels so clean, so sharp, so right. But behind that structure may still be distortion, manipulation, lies. Chunking doesn't make something true. It just makes it easier to believe. And in persuasion, that's often more than enough. Parallelism and triads. Parallelism and triads are the hypnotic rhythm of persuasion, patterns of 3 repeated structures and carefully mirrored phrasing that lull the brain into agreement. They feel poetic, familiar, balanced, and because they feel right, the mind begins to treat them as if they are right. Not because the content is convincing, but because the form is so satisfying, so rhythmic, so clean, it bypasses resistance and slips into memory like a melody. We came, we saw, we conquered. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Stop, drop, roll. These aren't just catchphrases, they're spells built on parallelism, where each part matches in structure, and triads, the magic number that feels complete. 1 feels empty, 2 feels unstable, but 3 feels whole, and in that wholeness, persuasion hides. The human brain is wired for pattern recognition. When it hears repetition with symmetry, it relaxes, it trusts, it remembers, and when a message is wrapped in that pattern, it gets coded as truth, because truth doesn't stutter, truth doesn't ramble, truth arrives polished, even when it lies. Speakers use this trick to make their words sound historic. Marketers use it to make their messages memorable. Manipulators use it to make their commands feel like common sense. Just do it. Own your life. Change the game. They don't need to explain. They don't need to prove. They just need to land. Parallelism and triads don't just make language beautiful. They make it believable. And once a phrase feels like music, you'll carry it, sing it, defend it, even if you never chose to believe it in the first place. Status elevation. Status elevation is the psychological high of being made to feel above the crowd, above the noise, above who you were just moments ago. It's the manipulation of identity through flattery, exclusivity, and subtle hierarchies. And it works because every human being craves one thing more than truth: significance. When someone lifts you up, tells you you're elite, evolved,
Exceptional. Your brain doesn't question it. It clings to it. You're not just buying a product. You're joining a premium tier. You're not just signing up. You've been invited. You're not just attending an event. You're accessing an inner circle. These words aren't accidental. They are status triggers, and they flip switches in your subconscious faster than logic can react. Status elevation is why cults crown members with titles, why luxury brands offer platinum levels, why masterminds, retreats, and mentorships whisper that they're not for everyone. The more exclusive something feels, the more worthy you feel for being part of it. And once someone gives you status, you'll do almost anything to keep it. You'll buy more, defend harder, obey quicker, because the greatest fear isn't falling behind. It's falling from grace, from belonging, from being seen. The terrifying truth is that status can be manufactured, given for free, assigned with a smile and a certificate. But the moment it sticks, the persuasion begins. You're no longer choosing based on what's best. You're choosing based on what reinforces your elevated identity. And the higher you're lifted, the more desperately you'll fight to stay above the crowd, even if it means handing over your freedom just to keep wearing the crown. Unfinished stories. Unfinished stories are the psychological cliffhangers that take your mind hostage, narratives that start strong, stir emotion, awaken curiosity, and then stop. No resolution, no answer, just a raw edge that leaves your brain restless, searching, desperate to know what happens next. And that desperation becomes leverage, because a mind suspended in narrative tension is a mind open to suggestion, influence, and persuasion. It begins with a setup. A woman enters the room shaking. She clutches something in her hand. She opens her mouth to speak, and then it cuts off. You're frozen. Your brain leans in, stretching for the ending, but there is none. That silence isn't empty. It's full of anticipation, discomfort, and vulnerability. And in that discomfort, your resistance weakens. Your mind doesn't just want the story, it needs it. This is why great speakers start with a dramatic moment and say, but more on that later. Why cults lure people in with cryptic promises. Why sales pages begin with a painful scenario and pause just before the relief. Unfinished stories provoke emotional engagement. They light up memory. They keep you thinking long after the words have stopped. And worse, your brain starts finishing the story on its own. You imagine the ending. You fill in the gaps. And when someone offers you their version of the conclusion, you welcome it. Not because it's convincing, but because it satisfies your craving. Unfinished stories don't fade, they echo. And the longer the silence lasts, the deeper the hook sinks. You don't just want the answer, you ache for it. And that ache makes you listen to anyone who claims they can deliver the rest. Temporal compression. Temporal compression is the mind-bending manipulation of time, shrinking the perceived length, effort, or pain of an action so it feels quicker, lighter, easier than it actually is. It's the trick that makes a 30-day grind sound like a 5-minute fix. It's not about changing the task, it's about changing how long your brain thinks it will take. And once something feels short, you're far more likely to say yes. This technique plays on the brain's hatred of long, draining commitments. Forever sounds terrifying. All year feels heavy, but reframe it. Just 3 easy steps, only 10 minutes a day, a few clicks and you're done. And suddenly, the emotional weight evaporates. It's not that the journey changed, the perception did, and perception drives action. Marketers inject temporal compression into everything. Lose weight fast. Instant results. Get rich in 7 days. These aren't promises, they're spells. They bypass caution and logic by appealing to urgency and ease. They make the future feel now, and now always feels better. Even spiritual and political movements do this. Change your life today. This is the moment. The idea isn't to stretch your effort across time. It's to make the mountain feel like a staircase, to make sacrifice feel like convenience. The danger lies in what's left out.
Temporal compression skips over setbacks, discomfort, complexity. It gives you the end without the middle. And once you believe the middle doesn't exist, you leap. Not because the road is short, but because someone made you feel like it would be. And that illusion is enough to get your feet moving. Specificity bias. Specificity bias is the mind's blind devotion to detail, how precision, even when meaningless, creates an illusion of truth. When something is stated with specifics, numbers, dates, names, measurements, it doesn't just sound smarter, it feels more real. The brain equates specificity with certainty and certainty with trust. Say, about 70% of people agree, and it's forgettable. Say, 71.4% of people agree, and suddenly it sounds researched, tested, legitimate, even if that number is fabricated. Your brain leans forward. It stops questioning the claim and starts assuming it's fact, all because of the decimal. This is the trick behind manipulated statistics, rigged studies, fake testimonials. 12,438 users downloaded today. In just 3.6 minutes a day, you can transform your life. Specificity hijacks logic by impersonating accuracy. It seduces your inner skeptic and feeds it details that feel too oddly precise to be made up. But they are, constantly. Advertisers use this to add weight to fluff. Politicians use it to solidify shaky narratives. Scammers use it to fake credibility. Specificity makes lies feel exact, makes manipulation sound measured, makes opinion feel like data. Even emotionally, it works. He always texts me at 11:12 p.m. Hits harder than he texts me late at night. Details add color, shape, and authority. They create a sense of insider knowledge, like you're being let in on something real. Exclusive. Specificity. Bias turns fiction into perceived fact, not through content, but through form. And once a number is burned into memory, it doesn't fade. It anchors the lie and makes it nearly impossible to shake loose. Reverse scarcity. Reverse scarcity is a psychological twist on the classic fear of loss principle. It doesn't scream, "You can't have this." It whispers, "You can have this anytime," and lets your desire quietly die. It's not just about urgency, it's about the absence of it. The seductive tension of something always being available, so available, in fact, that your brain stops chasing it. And that's where the persuader steps in. By removing the illusion of scarcity, they control your motivation in reverse. The mind equates scarcity with value, but when that scarcity disappears, when access is too easy, too endless, too guaranteed, interest fades. We tell ourselves we'll do it later. Get it next time, check it out when we have more time. The pressure's gone, the desire dulls, and soon we forget we ever wanted it at all. Persuaders use reverse scarcity to test real interest. They leave the door open on purpose. They say, "No rush, whenever you're ready, take your time," not because they want you to wait, but because they know your own inaction will build regret. You'll miss out, not because something vanished, but because you let it slip. Then, when they do close the door, cut off access, raise the price, end enrollment, the shift hits harder. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your fault. And now the product, the opportunity, the person becomes scarce again, but this time painfully so. Reverse scarcity doesn't chase you. It stands still. It lets you walk away. And in doing so, it leaves a vacuum of absence so deep it makes you run back, begging for what you once believed you had all the time in the world to claim. Visual fluency. Visual fluency is the brain's craving for clarity, a deep subconscious preference for what's clean, simple, and easy on the eyes. When something looks smooth, organized, symmetrical, your mind doesn't just appreciate it, it trusts it. Visual fluency doesn't just make a message prettier, it makes it believable, because when your brain doesn't have to struggle to decode, it rewards that ease with a false sense of truth. A well-designed website feels more credible
than a cluttered one, even if both say the same thing. A clean font in black on white gets more engagement than fancy, chaotic colors. A simple layout, wide margins, subtle animations, these don't just look good. They feel right, and because they feel right, they create an emotional shortcut. This must be true because it's easy to process. This is why powerful persuasion hides in design. Politicians use polished campaign ads with sharp contrast and structured framing. Luxury brands use white space and balance to imply exclusivity. Scam emails fail not just because of what they say, but because they look wrong. Visual disfluency triggers skepticism. Visual fluency dissolves it. You're not just absorbing information, you're absorbing aesthetic emotion. The smoother the delivery, the more your brain relaxes, the less you resist, the more you internalize. You think, I just like it. But really, your brain is confusing ease with honesty. Visual fluency doesn't yell, it doesn't explain, it just feels right. And once something feels right, you start defending it, long before you've even asked yourself why. Environmental priming. Environmental priming is the invisible manipulation of your mind through the space around you, an atmosphere engineered to influence how you think, feel, and behave without you ever realizing it. It's not about what someone tells you. It's about what your environment tells your nervous system before a single word is spoken. A soft lamp, warm colors, a subtle scent of vanilla. Suddenly, you feel calm, open, trusting. Walk into a room with hard edges, cold lighting, and sterile walls, and your guard goes up. The environment doesn't just shape your comfort, it shapes your decisions. Your posture changes, your voice adjusts, your willingness to say yes becomes elastic, molded by things you don't consciously notice. Persuaders use this with eerie precision. High-end stores play slow music to make you linger. Casinos remove clocks and pump in oxygen to keep you alert. Cult recruiters host meetings in homes with cozy furniture and low lighting to simulate family. Therapists design offices that make you feel safe enough to spill secrets. Every object, every sound, every texture is a nudge. Environmental priming also influences morality. Studies show people surrounded by cleanliness act more ethically. People in dim rooms take more risks. People exposed to religious symbols make different choices, even if they're not religious. Your values bend when the room whispers a different rhythm. It's not magic, it's sensory manipulation. And the most dangerous part? You'll think your choices were your own, but really, the room chose first. It spoke in silence, and your subconscious listened without resistance. Hyperbolic discounting. Hyperbolic discounting is the brain's betrayal of the future, the reason why we choose short-term pleasure over long-term reward, even when the math screams don't. It's the inner voice that whispers, just one more scroll, start tomorrow. You've earned this now. It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's wiring, and it's what makes us manipulable. The mind is biased toward immediacy. A small reward now feels more valuable than a massive one later, even if later is just around the corner, even if the delay would change everything. That's because the further away a reward feels, the more the brain discounts its value, not in a straight line, but in a curve, steep, irrational, emotional. This is why diets fail, why we swipe instead of study, why you take the free trial knowing you'll forget to cancel. It's not that we don't care about the future, it's that our biology makes the present feel so much louder. And manipulators? They love this glitch. Buy now, pay later, limited time bonus, only available today. These phrases hijack your urgency instinct. They shrink your window of reason. They trap you in now. They make consequences feel imaginary and gratification feel real. Hyperbolic discounting makes smart people gamble their goals for cheap dopamine. It trades vision for comfort, momentum for sedation, and it convinces you that your future self will figure it out later. But the truth is, later never comes, not unless you drag your brain out of the present, not unless you silence the craving, because as long as now wins, you lose, over and over again. Truthiness. Truthiness is the dangerous illusion that something feels true, even when it absolutely isn't. It bypasses facts. It sidesteps logic. It lives in your gut, in your emotions, in that strange inner nod that says, yeah, that sounds about right, even when your rational brain hasn't caught up. And once that feeling lands, your defenses crumble, because it doesn't have to be true. It just has to feel like it could be. This is how misinformation spreads like wildfire, not through accuracy, but through vibe, a well-lit headline, a confident speaker, a patriotic color scheme, a stock photo of a smiling doctor. These things don't prove anything, but they prime your brain to accept the message that follows. Your mind wants ease, familiarity, emotion, and truthiness delivers all three. Politicians use it in sound bites. We're taking back our country. It's vague, it's emotionally charged, it feels true, even if it means nothing. Marketers dress up pseudoscience with infographics and testimonials. Cults wrap fantasy in the tone of sacred certainty. The message is never tested, it's trusted because it hits something inside you before logic has time to question it. Truthiness is powerful because it doesn't care if you're smart. It only cares if you're human. It feeds your biases. It comforts your fears. It gives your brain a shortcut and your heart a reason. And by the time the facts show up, if they ever do, you've already decided. You don't believe it because it's true. You believe it because it feels like truth. And that feeling is almost impossible to unlearn. Faux choice. Faux choice is the illusion of freedom, when you're given multiple options, but every path leads exactly where the persuader wants you to go. It's not about control through force. It's control through design. You feel empowered. You feel in charge, but the outcome was already chosen for you. All they had to do was make you feel like you decided. Would you like to sign up for the 3-month plan or the 6-month plan? Do you want to start today or tomorrow? Would you prefer the red or the blue? None of these questions ask if you want it. They assume the sale. They embed compliance into structure. And because your brain reacts positively to choice, because it loves the feeling of agency, you pick one, not realizing you've been cornered with a smile. Faux choice is used in parenting, in sales, in interrogation rooms. Give a child the choice between broccoli or carrots. They focus on which, not whether. Shady marketers offer a basic and premium package to guide you to the overpriced best value in the middle. You think you weighed your options, but you were never shown the one you might have chosen if you weren't so distracted by the framing. This trick works because it taps into your identity. You feel autonomous. You feel smart. You made a decision, but it was never real freedom. It was a stage, a script, and you followed it, believing you were writing it yourself. That's the genius of faux choice. You never realize the leash was velvet. Identity priming. Identity priming is the invisible push that gets you to act, not by telling you what to do, but by reminding you who you are, or more dangerously, who you think you are. It's persuasion at the deepest level, where behavior doesn't feel like compliance, it feels like self-expression, because when someone activates your identity, your choices start bending to match it, not because they make sense, but because they fit the person you believe yourself to be. Tell someone, you're the type of person who follows through, and watch them work harder. Ask, what would a good parent do right now? And watch guilt morph into action. Identity is the strongest driver of behavior, stronger than logic, stronger than fear, stronger than incentives. When a decision feels like it protects or reflects who you are, it becomes automatic. Persuaders weaponize this by tying actions to labels. Real leaders sign up early. Smart investors know when to move. This is for people who don't make excuses. The action isn't pitched, the identity is, and you want to live up to it, because rejecting the action means rejecting yourself. But identity is fluid. It's vulnerable. It can be shaped. Politicians, cults, brands, they don't sell ideas. They sell versions of you. Join us, wear this, say this, believe this, because this is who you are now. And you'll protect that version of yourself like it's sacred, even if it's been handed to you by someone else. Identity priming doesn't force change. It makes change feel necessary. Because when your choices threaten the person you believe you are, the only escape is obedience. And that's how identity becomes a leash. Decorated, personalized, tight.
Urgency amplifiers. Urgency amplifiers are emotional accelerants, psychological triggers designed to compress your timeline, blur your logic, and make waiting feel like losing. They whisper that if you don't act now, you'll regret it, that the door is closing, that the moment will vanish, and your brain, flooded with cortisol and panic, trades patience for permission, to spend, to agree, to obey. Only 3 left. Offer expires in 4 hours. Cart reserved for the next 10 minutes. These aren't facts. They're triggers, crafted to make your rational mind shut down while your survival instincts take over. Because urgency doesn't just create desire, it creates fear, not of missing the thing itself, but of missing your chance at it. And that fear overrides everything. Scarcity makes things feel rare. Deadlines make them feel important. Together, they create a rush that feels real, even when it's manufactured. Marketers fake countdown clocks. Live sales fabricate inventory limits, flash deals that end, and then restart the next day. It doesn't matter. The emotion is what matters. And once you feel urgency, persuasion becomes effortless. This is how people buy things they don't need, how they sign contracts they haven't read, how they say yes to opportunities that leave them worse. The brain says, if I don't decide now, I might not get to decide at all. And that pressure feels like truth. Urgency amplifiers don't need proof. They just need a timer, a limit, a breathless tone. And once you're racing the clock, you're not making a decision. You're trying to outrun regret. Semantic anchoring. Semantic anchoring is the precision weapon of persuasion that latches an emotion, value, or meaning onto a specific word or phrase, so that every time you hear it afterward, the feeling returns. It's not about logic, it's about emotional residue. One word charged with carefully chosen context becomes a trigger, and once the anchor is set, the mind reacts automatically. You don't think, you feel. Politicians use this constantly. They say freedom when they mean control, family values when they mean exclusion, patriot when they mean loyal to them. The word becomes an anchor, a shortcut to a flood of feelings you've been trained to associate with it. Even when the context changes, the emotional tag sticks. Marketers do it too. Clean means safe. Natural means good. Premium means better. The product could be toxic, fake, or identical to every other, but the word anchored makes you believe. Your subconscious hears it and fills in the emotion on cue. Even manipulators in relationships use semantic anchoring. They attach loyalty to silence, love to obedience, trust to secrecy, and you don't realize it until it's too late, until a word you once valued starts controlling you. The danger of semantic anchoring lies in its invisibility. The word never changed. Your relationship to it did. And now, whenever someone says it, whoever says it, you feel something deep and irrational pulling you toward agreement, toward action, toward surrender. It's not the sentence that persuaded you. It was the word, the anchor, tied tightly around your emotion, tugging at your thoughts like a current you can't see, but can no longer escape. Pre-decision fatigue. Pre-decision fatigue is the quiet exhaustion that hits before a choice is ever made. It's the mental erosion that begins the moment options appear, before you click, commit, or even care. The more choices you face, the more mental energy you burn just holding them. Your brain starts to tire, not from action, but from possibility. And in that tiredness, your willpower begins to leak. This is when you're most persuadable, not because you're confused, but because you're drained. You want clarity, you want relief, so you take the easiest path. The highlighted button, the recommended plan, the most popular option, not because it's best, but because deciding anything else feels too hard. Persuaders engineer this on purpose. A pricing page with 5 plans, a form with 10 required fields, a funnel with endless upsells. It's not just about offering choices, it's about offering too many. And as the pressure builds, as analysis becomes exhausting, your brain begs for simplicity. It stops comparing, it stops questioning. It says, whatever, just let me be done. Even emotionally, pre-decision fatigue can break you. Endless swiping, too many dates, too many job options. You think you're empowered, but you're paralyzed. And the moment someone says, this is the right one, you feel saved. That relief isn't logic, it's surrender. Pre-decision fatigue doesn't force obedience, it creates mental surrender. And when your energy collapses, even the smallest nudge feels like guidance. But you didn't choose because it was right. You chose because your mind couldn't carry the weight of another maybe. Survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is the seductive illusion that blinds you with stories of success while quietly burying the failures. It's the manipulation of perception through omission, where the only examples you're shown are the ones that made it and the thousands who didn't. Erased, forgotten, made invisible. And without those ghosts to guide you, your brain starts drawing all the wrong conclusions. It's the entrepreneur who built a billion-dollar empire from nothing, the athlete who beat every odd, the artist who went viral overnight. You're told to follow in their footsteps, copy their habits, think like them, hustle like them, but you're not shown the thousands who did the same thing and crashed, burned, disappeared. Manipulators love survivorship bias because it tells a compelling story. It feeds you hope without data. It makes the rare feel normal. It makes luck look like strategy. This person dropped out of college and built a fortune. So can you. But how many dropped out and failed? How many believed the dream and never woke up? Marketers use this in testimonials. Influencers use it in highlight reels. Gurus use it in case studies. They cherry-pick the miracle, and they frame it as the rule. You look at the survivor and think, that could be me. But what you should be asking is, where are the bodies? Survivorship bias doesn't lie directly. It lies through silence. It manipulates by only showing you the winners, and when all you see is success, failure starts to look like a personal flaw, instead of what it often is, the rule, not the exception. Split test authority. Split test authority is the illusion of credibility born not from expertise, but from iteration. It's the power grab that comes when someone says, we tested 47 versions and this one won. Suddenly, doubt evaporates. You stop questioning, because if it survived that many rounds of testing, it must be right, mustn't it? But what you're really trusting isn't knowledge, it's data theater. Split test authority works because the brain worships numbers. Specificity feels like truth. When someone says a decision was data-backed, we imagine lab coats, spreadsheets, objectivity. But you're not being shown the test, or the failure, or the manipulation behind the metric. You're only seeing the winner, and you're being told to bow to it. Marketers exploit this constantly. We A/B tested 100 headlines. This one had the highest click rate. What they don't say, it only performed best in a single context, at a single time, or that the difference was negligible. But the phrase tested triggers trust. It makes you feel safe, like the hard thinking's been done for you. Even cults and tech giants use it. New onboarding flows, slightly different messages. The one that gets the most engagement becomes gospel, but performance doesn't equal value. It doesn't mean it's right. It just means it triggered more people. Split test authority isn't about what works best for you. It's about what converted more people like them. And when you accept that outcome as fact, you're not thinking for yourself.
You're submitting to the tyranny of the crowd, cloaked in the language of science. Flattery, compliance. Flattery compliance is the art of disarming the mind through praise, an emotional bribe that feels like kindness but functions as control. It's not about honest appreciation, it's about strategic ego stroking. The moment someone flatters you, they lower your defenses, inflate your self-image, and make you want to agree with them, not because they're right, but because they made you feel seen, special, superior. Compliments activate a primal reward circuit in the brain. They trigger dopamine. They light up self-worth. They make you feel good about you. And when you feel good about you, you start to feel good about the person who made you feel that way. You trust them. You want to reciprocate. And the easiest way to return the favor? Say yes, go along, comply. Manipulators use this with disturbing precision. You're one of the smartest people I've talked to today, followed by a pitch. I can tell you're a real leader, just before the ask. The praise isn't the point. It's the grease for the gears of persuasion. Even subtle flattery works. Eye contact paired with admiration, a nod of respect, a casual, I knew you'd understand. These phrases don't inform, they transform. They mold your self-perception into someone who would agree, who should agree. And the trap is gentle. You think you're being validated, empowered. But what's really happening is this. Your need to protect the flattering image they handed you becomes more important than protecting your own boundaries. You're not just being persuaded, you're being seduced by your own reflection. Affinity, targeting affinity. Targeting is the psychological seduction that happens when someone doesn't just speak to you, they speak to your tribe, your vibe, your world. It's not about demographic data, it's about emotional resemblance. When a message feels like it was made by someone who gets you, walls fall, trust blooms, resistance dies, and persuasion flows in, disguised as belonging. Humans are tribal creatures. We crave sameness. The moment we sense shared language, culture, or values, we relax. We listen closer. Affinity targeting exploits that reflex. The way a streetwear brand speaks to sneakerheads. The way a fitness coach tailors language to moms or lifters or vegans. The way a politician codes their message so it hits home with veterans, suburban dads, or online activists. This isn't accidental. It's engineered, down to the slang, the colors, the memes, the tone of voice. Affinity targeting creates a mirror, and when you see yourself in the message, you stop analyzing. Because people like us believe this, buy this, do this. Even cults and extremist groups use this tactic. They don't recruit the masses, they recruit the familiar, the gamer, the misfit, the misunderstood intellectual. They use shared pain, shared humor, shared enemies to build bridges that feel deeply personal, even though they're mass-produced. Affinity doesn't just make you feel seen, it makes you feel safe. And when you feel safe, you're open to ideas, to offers, to manipulation. You'll buy, follow, defend, not because it's right, but because it feels like yours. And once it feels like yours, you'll fight to keep it, even if it slowly rewrites who you are. Nostalgia triggers. Nostalgia triggers are emotional time machines, powerful cues that rip you out of the present and pull you into a carefully constructed past. Not the past as it really was, but the one your heart wants to remember. A smell, a song, a color, a childhood snack. And suddenly, you're not just remembering, you're feeling safe, innocent, free, vulnerable. Persuaders weaponize nostalgia because it creates instant emotional trust. When your guard is down and your heart is open, you don't think critically, you long. Nostalgia bypasses skepticism. It tells you, this is who you were, this is what you lost. And with a soft, aching whisper, it suggests, maybe you can have it again. Brands use retro packaging to revive childhood safety. Politicians invoke the good old days to stir loyalty. Religious movements, cults, even abusive partners romanticize
earlier times to make you forget the pain and crave the comfort. They don't sell progress. They sell return. Return to simplicity, to innocence, to you before the world broke you. But nostalgia lies. It edits out the mess. It puts a golden filter on memories and turns emotion into persuasion. You don't remember facts. You remember feelings. And when those feelings come rushing back, so does your openness, your trust, your longing to believe. The more disconnected you feel in the present, the more vulnerable you are to nostalgia triggers. They tell you you're not just buying a product or an idea, you're reclaiming a piece of yourself. But the truth is, you're not going backward. You're being led, softly, sweetly, into a version of the past someone else is using to control your future. Cognitive dissonance traps. Cognitive dissonance traps are mental cages, carefully designed situations that make your thoughts and actions collide, creating psychological tension so uncomfortable that you'll do almost anything to escape it. And that escape, that's where persuasion lives, not in logic, not in truth, but in the desperate need to feel consistent with who you think you are. When your actions betray your identity, when you lie but see yourself as honest, when you obey but call yourself independent, when you conform but believe you're a rebel, your mind panics. It needs to fix the contradiction. And instead of changing your actions, you change your beliefs. You rewrite the story. I didn't betray my values. I adapted. I didn't fall for that pitch. I made an informed decision. This is the trap. Persuaders create that tension, then offer the easiest way out. Buy this, believe this, join us. The moment you step into their frame, they push you to act in ways that don't quite match who you say you are. Then they watch you bend your beliefs to align with the new behavior. Cults use this. So do brands, influencers, politicians. They'll make you promote a message, then confront you with how it conflicts with your identity. That twisting discomfort forces you to choose, admit you were wrong, or double down and defend it harder. And most people, terrified of inconsistency, choose the second. Cognitive dissonance traps don't persuade by reason. They trap you in a fight with yourself. And when that fight becomes unbearable, you surrender, not to them, but to the version of you they subtly created, the one who needs to be right at any cost. Ritual framing. Ritual framing is the transformation of simple actions into sacred ones, a subtle psychological tactic that adds meaning, weight, and emotional resonance to otherwise ordinary behaviors. It turns the mundane into the meaningful, the repeatable into the revered. And once something becomes a ritual in your mind, it becomes harder to question, harder to resist, and almost impossible to abandon. Rituals are powerful because they offer structure in a chaotic world. They promise purpose, safety, identity, and when someone wraps their message, product, or ideology in ritual, it begins to feel less like a choice and more like a calling. You're not just drinking a shake. You're starting your morning success ritual. You're not just attending a seminar. You're stepping into your transformation. The action hasn't changed, but your perception has been reframed, and now it matters. Religions have used ritual framing for centuries. So have cults, coaches, brands, and movements. They attach music, phrases, candles, steps, mantras, anything that repeats and reinforces identity. The more often you do it, the more it becomes you. And soon, stepping away feels like self-betrayal. Even small gestures, lighting a candle, saying a phrase, wearing a certain color, can trigger internal shifts if they're framed as part of a ritual. They're no longer acts, they're anchors, and the more emotionally charged they become, the deeper they dig into your psyche. Ritual framing doesn't persuade you through facts or pressure. It persuades by meaning. It makes your actions sacred, and sacred things are obeyed, defended, preserved, even when logic fades and freedom quietly slips away. Pseudo-diagnosis. Pseudo-diagnosis is the psychological magic trick that makes you believe you've been seen, understood, labeled, when in reality, you've been fed a vague, generic truth designed to feel deeply personal. It's not about helping you, it's about hooking you. Once someone gives you a label that feels accurate, you begin to build your identity around it, and that identity becomes leverage. You're an overthinker. You're a natural leader who just hasn't found the right tribe. You're emotionally blocked because of childhood wounding. These are not medical diagnoses. These are fishing hooks, carefully worded fragments, wide enough to catch almost anyone, sharp enough to feel precise, and once you recognize yourself in the label, the trap closes. You want to believe it, because now you feel known. Persuaders use pseudo-diagnosis to create problems that only they can solve. Gurus invent new personality types. Coaches invent emotional wounds. Marketers create test results that spit out 5 flattering adjectives and 1 carefully planted flaw, just enough to make you say, "That's me," and now you're ready for the solution. The course, the product, the transformation. The most dangerous part? The diagnosis feels like insight. It feels revelatory. It makes you rethink your past, your choices, your potential. You stop seeing it as a sales tactic and start treating it like a truth you never had words for until now. But it's not truth. It's a frame, a mirror polished just enough to show you what you wanted to see. And once you see it, you'll chase its meaning all the way to their solution, all the way into their control. Mystery gap, closure, mystery gap, closure is the irresistible pull of the unknown, the magnetic tension created when someone gives you just enough to make your brain crave the rest. It's not about curiosity, it's about discomfort, a psychological itch that demands to be scratched. The moment a gap opens between what you know and what you need to know, your mind enters a loop, and whoever controls the gap controls your focus. This is the secret behind cliffhangers, teasers. You won't believe what happens next. It's why people stay on a page longer, binge watch shows, click articles, even listen to bad advice, because the gap has been planted and silence now feels unbearable. Your brain isn't just intrigued, it's agitated, and the only relief is closure. Persuaders master this by revealing just enough truth to stir a question, then withholding the answer until they've pulled you deeper. There's one thing all successful people do. "I made this mistake that nearly ruined everything." The sentence isn't meant to inform. It's designed to trap. Your attention isn't voluntary anymore. It's held hostage by suspense. And the more personal the gap feels, the more you can't let go. If it's about your identity, your future, your relationships, your success, the mystery grabs your throat. Because closure doesn't just satisfy curiosity, it restores control. Mystery gap. Closure doesn't manipulate with answers. It manipulates by holding them just out of reach. And in chasing the truth, you don't realize the path you followed wasn't yours. It was laid, one breadcrumb at a time, by someone who already knew exactly where they wanted you to go. Fractal persuasion. Fractal persuasion is the hypnotic technique of embedding the same message at every level of communication, so that no matter where your mind lands, it finds the same core idea again and again, like echoes inside echoes. It's not repetition, it's patterned reinforcement, a persuasive truth tucked into the headline, the story, the image, the CTA, the aftertaste. Each element alone might be subtle, but together they create a message that feels inescapable. Your brain craves patterns. It hunts for structure, meaning, cohesion. When it finds the same theme repeated in different forms, words, tone, visuals, even body language, it relaxes. It believes. The consistency doesn't just feel convincing, it feels true. And the message, now fractalized, seeps in deeper than logic. You stop thinking about if it's right and start wondering how soon you'll act on it. Manipulators build these fractals with surgical precision. A wellness brand might whisper purity in its ingredients, its packaging, its testimonials, its tone. A cult leader speaks of awakening in every metaphor, every ritual, every silence. A salesperson echoes freedom in the product name, in the benefits, in the story of their own transformation. Fractal persuasion works because it doesn't push, it surrounds. It creates emotional harmony, the illusion that everything lines up, that this idea must be right because it keeps showing up in every form, like destiny calling through every crack. And by the time you realize every part of the message was engineered to feel aligned, it's already inside you, folded in layers, reflecting itself forever, and you'll call it truth. But it was architecture, all along. Psychological mirroring. Psychological mirroring is the silent language of influence, the unconscious mimicry of another person's behaviors, expressions, tone, and emotional energy that creates a powerful illusion of connection. It's not about manipulation in the obvious sense. It's about making someone feel seen, reflected, understood, and once someone feels that deep, unspoken resonance, their defenses dissolve. This technique works because the human brain is hardwired to seek familiarity. When someone mirrors you, your posture, your pace, your phrasing, it signals safety, similarity, belonging. Your subconscious whispers, "They're like me," and when you believe someone is like you, you're far more likely to trust them, agree with them, even follow them. Persuaders wield this with surgical precision. In conversation, they subtly adjust their body to match yours. They mirror your tone, excited when you're excited, quiet when you grow serious. They reflect your language, your values, your rhythm. It feels organic, but it's engineered, deliberate, designed to build rapport faster than logic ever could. Even emotional mirroring, showing empathy not just through words, but through facial expressions, breath patterns, micro-reactions, creates intimacy. Suddenly, you're not alone in your experience. Someone else is there with you, and that illusion makes their message feel true, their presence feel safe, their influence feel earned. But this reflection isn't always real. Sometimes it's a mask, and the more perfectly someone mirrors you, the more you should pause, because you may not be bonding with a kindred spirit. You may be bonding with a mirror built to make you feel comfortable enough to say yes, not to the person, to the persuasion, hidden beneath your own reflection. Loss aversion framing. Loss aversion framing is the emotional sleight of hand that makes you terrified to let go of something, even if you never truly had it. It doesn't persuade you with what you'll gain, it persuades you with what you'll lose. And because the human brain is hardwired to feel the pain of loss twice as powerfully as the pleasure of gain, this technique doesn't just nudge, it grips. Offer someone 10 and they'll smile. Threaten to take away 10 they already had and they'll panic. Now apply that to a free trial ending, a disappearing offer, an expiring discount. You weren't going to buy it, but now the idea of losing it feels personal, illogical, agonizing. The opportunity flips from optional to essential. Loss aversion framing isn't about removing something real. It's about making something feel like it already belongs to you. Don't miss out. Hold on to your spot. Keep your access. These phrases trick your brain into thinking the product is already yours, that walking away is forfeiture, not refusal. And forfeiture stings. Manipulators don't sell benefits. They sell preservation. They sell you the fear of slipping backward, of falling behind, of waking up tomorrow with less than you have today. And your brain, desperate to avoid regret, moves fast, impulsively, because in the language of loss, later means gone. And so you buy, you comply, not because it's right, but because the thought of losing what you never asked for suddenly feels unbearable. You were never choosing gain, you were fleeing loss, and the frame made that panic feel like urgency, like need, like truth. Mimetic desire. Mimetic desire is the invisible contagion of wanting. Desire not born from within, but absorbed from others. You don't just want the thing, you want it because they want it,
because someone else, even unknowingly, signaled that it was valuable, desirable, worth chasing, and your brain, wired for survival through imitation, obeys without question. This isn't surface-level envy. It's deeper, quieter. You see someone drawn to something, a lifestyle, a person, a product, and their desire lights a fire in you, not because you need it, not even because you understand it, but because wanting what others want makes you feel connected, elevated, safe, like you're part of something. Persuaders know this. Luxury brands show models desiring the object more than wearing it. Social media influencers casually reveal what they're obsessed with. Artificial scarcity is created not to limit supply, but to signal that others want it first, and the more others want it, the more you burn for it. Mimetic desire turns humans into mirrors. It makes your goals feel urgent, simply because they're shared. It breeds rivalry, obsession, and deep insecurity. Suddenly, you're not buying to satisfy a need. You're buying to validate an identity, to keep up, to belong. The most terrifying part? Once mimetic desire grips you, it feels real, personal, like something you've always wanted. You don't realize that want was planted, copied, passed from someone else's longing into your bloodstream. And by the time you reach for it, you believe it was always yours. But it wasn't. It was theirs, and now it lives in you. Autonomy, reinforcement autonomy. Reinforcement is the persuasion technique that wins your obedience by making it feel like rebellion. It doesn't pressure. It doesn't demand. Instead, it hands you a choice, one that's already been designed to serve the persuader's goal, and whispers, "You're in control." And because nothing is more seductive than the feeling of freedom, you step forward willingly, convinced it was your idea all along. Humans are hardwired to defend autonomy. The moment we feel push, we push back. But when a decision is framed as self-directed, resistance dissolves. Of course, the choice is yours. You're free to decide either way. No pressure. Just think about what's right for you. These aren't empty phrases. They're psychological pressure valves. They lower defenses, soothe ego, and activate the illusion of independent thought. The genius of autonomy. Reinforcement is that it makes you feel powerful while you're being gently guided. You say yes, not under force, but under the belief that you've exercised judgment, that you own the choice. And once you own a decision, you're far more likely to justify it, defend it, and follow through. Manipulators use this in sales, therapy, dating, even politics. They don't command, they frame. Most people choose this option, but totally up to you. And just like that, the weight of influence is shifted off their shoulders and onto yours. You were guided, but you'll never call it that. You'll call it empowerment. You'll call it clarity. You'll call it yours. And that's exactly why it worked. Moral credentialing. Moral credentialing is the dangerous permission slip your brain writes for itself. The illusion that one good act justifies a future one that's selfish, reckless, or even wrong. It's not about ethics. It's about ego maintenance. Once you've proven your virtue, even just once, you feel licensed to let your guard down. And that's when persuasion quietly slips in. You recycle once so you feel fine flying across the world. You donate to charity, then splurge without guilt. You post about justice, then ignore injustice in real life. The brain clings to those moral points like armor, using them to justify contradiction. And you still feel like a good person because you were once. Persuaders exploit this loophole masterfully. A marketer might ask you to support a cause before pitching a luxury product. A manipulator may flatter your integrity before nudging you towards something you'd normally resist. Once you've been reminded of your goodness, your resistance weakens. You're no longer guarding your identity. You've already proven it. Now you feel free to indulge or comply. Even worse, moral credentialing can blind you to your own hypocrisy. You think, I support the right causes, I said the right thing, I'm not the problem. And in that self-assurance, you become easier to influence because self-satisfaction replaces self-awareness. The trap is subtle. You think you've built immunity to persuasion, but really, you've just created a mask of morality that makes it easier to manipulate you, because the more righteous you feel, the less likely you are to question the next step, especially when it leads in the wrong direction. Dual process persuasion. Dual process persuasion is the psychological double play that targets both parts of your brain at once, the fast, emotional you and the slow, rational you. It doesn't rely on reason alone. It doesn't just appeal to feeling. It splits the message down the middle, speaking to your instincts and your intellect in perfect synchronization. And when both systems agree, even for a moment, your resistance collapses. System 1 is the quick, intuitive processor. It reacts to stories, images, tone, and emotion. It loves simplicity. It loves confidence. It loves gut feelings. System 2, meanwhile, is slower, deliberate, logical. It wants proof. It wants explanation. It wants to feel smart. Most persuasion tactics target one or the other, but the masters, the real manipulators, target both. They make you feel something: urgency, hope, fear, connection. Then they back it up with a stat, a chart, a study, or they hit you with data first, then wrap it in a narrative that sticks. A moving testimonial, a sharp headline, a confident pause. You're convinced emotionally and intellectually, and that moment of alignment feels like truth. Advertisers do this in seconds. Politicians build entire speeches around it. Cult leaders weaponize it. They stir your heart, then hand you the logic to justify it. You feel something, you understand it, and now it's yours. Dual process. Persuasion doesn't argue. It harmonizes. It makes belief feel like clarity. And when both parts of your mind nod in agreement, it doesn't feel like you were influenced at all. It feels like you arrived. Time scarcity. Time scarcity is the psychological pressure cooker that makes rational thought collapse under the weight of a ticking clock. It's not just urgency, it's manufactured panic. It's the countdown timer flashing red, the limited time offer about to vanish, the fake clock winding down in your subconscious until your only focus becomes act now or lose forever. And when your brain feels time slipping away, it doesn't choose wisely, it chooses quickly. This trick works because humans are wired to overvalue immediate opportunities and fear loss more than they crave gain. When you're told you only have minutes left to decide, your brain shifts into survival mode. The rational mind, slow, careful, deliberate, goes dark. In its place, emotion takes the wheel. Fear, pressure, FOMO, all of it converging into one urgent command: decide. Persuaders thrive in this chaos. Online stores use countdowns and only 2 left warnings. Coaches close enrollment at midnight. Fake scarcity floods your inbox with last chance and doors closing. You feel like you're on the edge of something final, like saying no now means you can't have it later, and that imagined loss feels real. Time scarcity doesn't give you time to think. That's the point. It makes inaction feel dangerous. It turns waiting into weakness, and in your rush to avoid regret, you hand over your money, your agreement, your trust, sometimes without even knowing what you just said yes to. Because when the clock's ticking loud enough, the only thing louder is the voice in your head screaming, "Don't miss this," even if it was never real to begin with. Hobson's choice. Hobson's choice is the illusion of freedom wrapped around a single, pre-engineered outcome. It offers you what looks like a decision, but in reality, there's only one real path, one option dressed up as a choice, one door slightly ajar, while all the others are locked behind smiles, language, or invisible pressure. And you'll walk through it, feeling empowered because it feels like you chose it. The brilliance of Hobson's choice is in its subtlety. You can take this or take nothing. You can enroll today or miss your opportunity entirely. You're free to walk away, but you won't get another shot. It's not coercion, it's construction.
a trap disguised as a menu. The psychology behind it is simple. Humans hate losing agency, so when we're offered any kind of choice, we cling to it, even when that choice is hollow, even when one option is clearly engineered to be the only acceptable one. The moment you frame the decision in terms of personal agency, you decide, no pressure, the target steps forward, proud, in control, unaware they were never choosing anything at all. Sales funnels use it, governments use it, abusers use it. Stay and be loyal, or leave and be nothing. Buy now or lose the discount forever. No matter the context, the pattern is the same. Offer only one real option and make the alternative feel impossible, shameful, or self-destructive. You thought you chose. You didn't. You were handed one exit and told it was a hallway. And with a nod, you stepped inside, feeling free, but you were already in the cage. Frequency framing. Frequency framing is the subtle manipulation of how information is presented, not by changing the content, but by changing the scale. It transforms meaning through numbers, making something sound massive or insignificant simply by choosing the right metric. It doesn't lie, it distorts, and when done right, it makes danger feel ordinary and the ordinary feel urgent. Tell someone 1 in 100 people will be affected, and it feels rare. Say 10 out of every 1,000, and it feels safer. But reframe it as 1,000 people a day, and now it feels like an epidemic. Nothing has changed in reality, only how it was framed, and your brain, starved for clarity and wired to fear the big and frequent, takes the bait. This is the magic of frequency framing. It bypasses logic by inflating or minimizing perception. Politicians use it to magnify fear. Thousands of illegal acts every year. Sounds terrifying until you realize it's less than 1 per town. Marketers inflate relevance. Every 30 seconds someone buys this. But they don't tell you where or why or what that number actually means. They only tell you it's happening often, and your brain fills in the rest. Even advocates use it ethically to show injustice, to reveal patterns that feel invisible until they're framed in frequency. 1 woman is abused every 5 minutes. That number hurts more than statistics ever could because it feels close. Frequency framing isn't about what's true. It's about what feels true when multiplied, compressed, or reframed. And once the number hits your gut, not your head, the persuasion has already begun. Guided discovery. Guided discovery is the art of making someone believe they found the truth themselves, when in reality, you led them straight to it. It's not about telling, it's about leading, step by step, thought by thought. Like laying breadcrumbs in the woods, only you already know where the trail ends, and by the time they arrive, they believe it was their idea all along. This technique is powerful because people resist being told what to believe, but they defend what they think they've discovered on their own. When someone feels like they connected the dots, their ego latches on. They feel smart, insightful, awake. They trust their conclusion because it came from within, or so they think. Manipulators know this, so they ask just the right questions. They hint, they suggest. They lead with stories instead of facts. They plant a feeling, then wait for you to give it words. What do you think that means? Why do you think they did that? Isn't that interesting? And slowly, gently, you walk through the door they left open. You think you opened it. Cult leaders, therapists, con artists, elite marketers, they all use guided discovery, not to force belief, but to guide you into owning it. And once you do, it becomes nearly impossible to reject, because to reject it would mean admitting you were led, that the brilliant realization you clung to was actually planted. Guided discovery doesn't push. It lets you walk the path alone, while every step, every stone, every conclusion was placed there, waiting for you to claim it as your own. Clarity illusion. Clarity illusion is the dangerous comfort of thinking you understand something when in truth, You don't. It's the manipulation of perception through simplicity, where a message is delivered so cleanly, so confidently, so fluently, that your brain mistakes ease for truth. You feel like you've grasped it, but all you've done is glide across the surface. This illusion thrives on neat phrases, crisp slogans, bite-sized takeaways that make complex ideas feel obvious. Work smarter, not harder. Just be yourself. We're here to help. They sound wise. They feel empowering. But when you press deeper, they collapse. They're shells, emotionally charged, cognitively effortless, but hollow underneath. The brain loves clarity. It avoids confusion like pain. So when something feels clear, it feels safe. And when it feels safe, we accept it. We stop questioning. This is exactly where persuaders strike. Influencers speak in bold absolutes. Leaders repeat sound bites. Marketers offer one simple secret. The message doesn't need depth. It only needs to feel clear. And the scariest part? The clearer it feels, the more confident you become, not in them, in yourself. You believe you get it, that you're informed, empowered, but that confidence is built on air. The illusion of understanding gives way to action without comprehension, and that's where the control begins. Clarity. Illusion doesn't persuade with evidence. It persuades with style, and once your brain believes it understands, it stops searching. It stops resisting, because it's convinced the thinking is already done.